Yeah.
From my computer or from my account. So I think it just undid everything.
Huh. You're right, it is being. I just don't know why it's not pushing.
You have to do something in like the YouTube account.
That's what I'm wondering if maybe it's listed as like private. So I have YouTube Studio. Shark Week Day 1. Oh, not Finder. Unlisted. Good call. So now,
I just wanted to make sure all the audio
Yeah.
was coming through.
is it live now?
Yeah.
There you go. I apologize. Good to know. All right. I'll leave this as an option for you. It's on the content streaming page. Otherwise, just I'm gonna lower it on OBS's end. Testing. All right. Okay. Found it. All right. Does anybody even know what movie that's from? Ferris Bueller? What? Get cultured. How are you guys? One of the few movies you haven't seen? I get it. Jazz fingers. It's how we greet each other in the hall. It's a rule. She was really down one day, so I said, no, guys. I mean, you didn't rise to the level of love that I wanted, so. You need to add motion. Oh, it does it?
They did, yeah.
So, like, to demonstrate, you would, like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And then when you get to the climax, the waves.
Yeah, the waves, guys. Can you guys see?
You show up during your presentation, be like, then I do this. It was a rough sea that day. I promise I'm not making a mockery.
No, it is.
We have fun. That's so cool. Where did you make these from? Carve those?
I made those out of like Crayola or dry clay.
That's wild.
The rest is cardboard.
What is the earliest in your life? What's the earliest set you remember making as a kid? Or maybe were you into it as a kid?
I mean, like my stuffed animals and stuff. if I would like set them up in
Cool.
school. I don't know why kids
Yeah.
always want to put their stuffed animals in a classroom.
It's true though. You know why?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I watch my stepdaughter do it. She likes to be the boss. So she gets a chance to like turn the table on the stuffies. She's like, "You're going." The principal's like, "What did they even do?"
Yeah, me and my best friend growing up, she would get like, we would play school with our stuffed animals, but then she would get like really violent. I'm like,
Let me go see who's signed up.
I know there's yeah. You have a smaller group.
oh, nice.
But what class are you guys coming from? What class?
Gym.
Let's skip it, have it. Yeah.
Wait,
We signed up for
I
this.
thought you were in Moberg's class.
No.
Oh,
Is this everybody?
you guys not in Moberg's class?
No.
Okay, so
We individually signed up for this because we wanted to know.
you guys over there?
Sure you're not in Moberg.
You guys Moberg's class?
I mean, no, we're all positive.
Okay, so wait a minute.
We all like these.
That was what I said it was gonna be.
We're like, yeah.
I was gonna say, I know you got some new ones here.
Wait, so
Okay.
you guys are skipping gym to me?
Yes.
Oh my
But this
God.
stuff really cool.
Oh my God, I would totally have skipped gym. Yeah. High school. That is amazing. Thank you guys. Thank you for coming.
So Mr. Moberg, who you met back there, his class is supposed to be here. Maybe they're meeting in the room to start. Let me check back here. Otherwise, we'll get started. It'll be fun.
Here we go.
Small, oh, here we go. Okay, small but mighty is your group in this one. But,
Yeah.
as I said, these are these are thespians.
Oh, good.
Yes. And Mr.
Okay.
Moberg says they're coming from. Are you guys Moberg's class? Yeah. Sweet. Sweet,
Nice.
sweet. Okay. You want to do your own intro for such a small group, or?
Sure, yeah.
Perfect, cool. Oh my God! Hi guys.
Hey, no put it in the black box.
Yeah. Hey. So after this, you guys better be thinking about some set design stuff for in the black box.
I do sound.
It's all interconnected.
Ooh. This is what you're about to learn. Actually, I got you.
You guys say
Okay.
picture this.
Me? Okay. So, hi everybody, welcome to day 2 of Spark Week. Has anybody been to anything so far? Is this your first thing? First thing, awesome. If it's your second or even your third thing, amazing too. Joining us right now is Lucy Green. She's a theatrical designer, artist, and musician. Okay? She has done work for Steppenwolf Theater, Chicago Shakespeare Theater, Broadway Playhouse, Barry Theater, Drury Lane Theater, Chicago Children's Theater, and Theater Cedar Rapids. When I was talking to her earlier, and I saw that she'd done stuff for Mary Theater. Anybody ever been to Mary Theater? It's like the theater in the round. No? Okay. I love it. My son loves it. She's done a lot of the shows there, like the Titanic. What was the other one?
Arthur.
Arthur was the one that my son loves. She did some stuff for Arthur for that one. So I'm going to hand over to her. Give her your best attention. Put your phones away. You will not be able to hide. And she will call you out. And she'll shrink you down to live in one of her sets.
Absolutely. Do I need to use a microphone for a smaller group? Can everybody hear me? All right, I'm just gonna put this here. But I hear that this is a group of thespians, which is really, really excited. So really excited to introduce this to you today. And I'm gonna start with kind of a grandiose question. Bear with me, but I'm just genuinely really curious what you guys think. Why is it you guys think we make art? Feel free to shout it out, raise your hand. Express ourselves? Yeah, totally. Anyone else? So I've been thinking about this a lot lately, and I keep returning to this one quote that I encountered my last year of high school that kind of changed the way I think about why I do what I do. And it's a quote from this author named Michael Chabon. And in this essay, he's basically saying that the world is broken, as we know. And he compares the world to a jigsaw puzzle with all the pieces kind of scattered about the floor, and everyone is just trying their best to pick up pieces and put something back together. But we don't have a picture on the box. We don't know what that final puzzle is supposed to look like. We don't know what the perfect world is supposed to look like. So bear with me, it's kind of a long quote. I'm going to read it out loud to you guys. But he says, some people, passing among the scattered pieces of that great overturned jigsaw puzzle, start to pick up a piece here, a piece there, with a vague yet irresistible notion that perhaps something might be done about putting the thing back together again. The most we can hope to accomplish with our handful of salvage bits, the bittersweet harvest of observation and experience, is to build a little world of our own. A scale model of that mysterious original, unbroken, half-remembered. Of course, the worlds we build out of our store of fragments can only be approximations, partial and inaccurate. As representations of the vanished whole that haunts us, they must be accounted failures. And yet in that very failure, and their gaps and inaccuracies, they may yet be faithful maps, accurate scale models of this beautiful and broken world. We call these scale models works of art. And when I first encountered this quote, it really got me thinking that every single thing that we create, every piece of art, whether it's a painting, a musical composition, a choreographed dance, it's in its own sense a collage. We're all taking bits and pieces of things that we find around us and we're rearranging them. Whether that's in music, we're taking bits of songs that we've heard and putting them together in different ways, different notes. Everything is recycled, everything's been done before, but we're just putting our own voices into it, and we're creating our own little worlds, our own little models of what we think the world ought to be. And I think that theater is one of the more overall encompassing art forms that we use to create little tiny worlds because it uses all these different mediums together. And so, thinking about how I got into this, I was trying to remember what was going through my mind when I was where you guys are now, when I was in high school, and I was actually really, really interested in biology. Any biology people in here? Yeah. I was really only interested in evolutionary biology, though. Once it got into like a cellular level and involved chemistry, I'm like, I can't be bothered. But I'm thinking about it, and I still find this stuff really fascinating, and thinking about why is it I was so drawn to this, and I realized this is design. This is storytelling. We are looking at different we're making different visual connections in the natural world and drawing conclusions about stories that brought those about. So if, for instance, like if you look at a manatee's flipper and you compare the way that looks to an elephant's toenails, and you can kind of deduce how those creatures are interconnected. And thinking about finches and the way that their beaks look and thinking about how that interacts with their environment, it's all just, we're taking these clues and we're telling ourselves stories about how these things came to be. And if you think about theater, movies, TV, even video games, anything that involves world building, the most interesting thing that we as consumers of those pieces of media, the thing that I personally find interesting is being an evolutionary biologist for that world, deducing how different things came about, figuring out the history of that world, and the best designers give you little clues into that. So it's a very powerful thing that you can do. And when I was in high school, I was also very into visual art, and as well as music. These are some of the paintings that I did when I was in high school, and I just remember this feeling of picturing something in my head, something three-dimensional, something like being able to walk through a space in my head, and then wanting to put it on paper, and then I did, and I put a frame around it, and there was just something supremely unsatisfying about it. I just like would make a painting, be like, that's it. And I couldn't figure out why. And I mean, not gonna lie, there is something exciting about painting, and I still do just straight up paintings like this today. But there was something missing. And so I thought, well, maybe I should just paint really big. Maybe that'll fix it. And so I started painting for my high school theater department, and that did unlock something. But it wasn't because I was painting at a larger scale, even though that is really exciting. It was seeing a painting in a larger context, seeing people in front of it, seeing it become part of a larger story, seeing lights interact with it, sound interact with it, seeing it take on different meanings at different parts of the story. That really started to feel much more satisfying than just creating a painting. And here are some more images from my high school. We did a production of Stan-a-Lot. Are you guys familiar with Stan-a-Lot at all? Yeah. So this was something, that image on the right, that's supposed to be the feet of God, that flying at one point. And that was just a little joke I was able to put in, getting God across. That's not in the script, but that's something that I realized designers are able to do. You're able to interject your own little tidbits into the story that otherwise wouldn't be there. And so that brings us to this word that is scenography, which the formal definition is, this term scenography includes all of the elements that contribute to establishing an atmosphere and mood for a theatrical presentation: lighting, sound, set, and costume design. And I personally expand that definition to include puppetry, because I am secondarily a puppetry designer, and even movement design, choreography. All of these different elements coming together to contribute to this little tiny world that is the play, that is the musical, whatever production that you're working on. And when I was in high school, I was interested in biology, I was interested in art, I was also interested in music, and I'm still working as a musician today. And I was thinking about how that also contributes to scenography, and I was thinking about this quote by an artist named Jean-Michel Basquiat, and he says, "Art is how we decorate space, and music is how we decorate time." And I think theater is how we decorate space over time. So we're taking this visual art form, and we have to think about how the audience experiences it over a span of time. And so you have to kind of think like a composer. You have to think about pacing, beats. And so that's another thing when I realized, like, that's why some of these disparate interests I have all lend themselves to scene design. This felt like an important quote to include. And I'll share an example with you guys of what I mean by you have to think musically when you're working as a theatrical designer. This is a show. It was called In the Next Room. It was produced in a black box theater, smaller than this one here. Ceilings were about 8 feet high. And the show just is about this couple living in Victorian London, having trouble connecting with each other, and it just takes place in a living room until the very last scene. And in the script it says everything is supposed to disappear, and we're supposed to end up in this winter garden. And space like this, there's no room to bring anything up dramatically from a trapdoor in the ground, fly anything in from overhead, or even really bring anything on and off stage. So what I ended up doing was taking invisible blacklight paint and painting all of these flowers all over the floor, all over the sets. You can't really see this picture, but even it went into the audience. So in this final moment, and this was coalesced with some really brilliant sound design as well, the blacklights just turned on and the space was transformed. And so we really had to calibrate that moment and think about timing, and like I said, with the sound design, really just bring everything together to create this really fantastical moment that the audience remembered when they left the theater. And so now I'm going to talk to you guys about what actually goes into a scenic design. What does it look like to go through the process of creating this? What does a scenic designer do? I'm going to use an example of a show I designed a couple years ago called Pity, and I have the scale model right here if anyone wants to come up and take a closer look later. But this was is anybody here familiar with absurdism? Does anyone know what I mean when I say that? You do? Can you tell us what it is?
Wait. Sorry. I think I know like a general gist of it, but I don't know if I can explain it.
That's okay. I kind of know a general gist of it too. It's hard to explain. It's a genre of theater. It's also just like or TV. I think of it. It's what it sounds like. It's absurd. It's a bunch of fantastical, absurd things happen, but there's another element to it, and that element is the way that people react. And in the worlds of these absurdist plays, people tend to be nonchalant as crazy things are happening around them. And there's that dissonance that happens that's characteristic of this genre. And it's just something, the way that we see people behave, it just puts us in a different mindset when we engage in these types of plays. But anyway, this was a play called Pity. And I read it for the first time when I was in a playwriting class in college. And in this play, there are many buildings, and they all explode. And there is a flood, there is an earthquake, there's a tornado, there's a lot of bombings, there's a lot of really terrible things that happen. And I remember reading this play and thinking, this is brilliant, but I'm not designing it. God, that would be hard. And then, a couple of years later, the professor of that class called me up and said, hey, I'm directing this show, do you want to design it? And I said, absolutely. Really glad I did because it was such an interesting challenge. But, so the first step when designing a show I like to do is I like to take a second and do a lot of personal reflection. And every designer is different, so I'm just going to be going through what my process is, but yours will be different. This is just something that I find that I need to do. Because when you are working on design, it's months and months of your life. You have to find a way to care about the piece that you're working on. It's your responsibility as an artist to find your own personal end, because if you're not passionate about a piece, if you're not finding a personal connection with the text, how can you expect your audience to? And it's also your responsibility when you're working in theater, you are working with a larger team. And there's nothing worse than being on a team with somebody who's saying, oh no, this place sucks. I mean, we're all like, a lot of the time you are working on something that you think overall, maybe the play is not the best, but you have to find a way in. So I was thinking about this play that's about all of these tragedies compounding and happening over and over again. It's a very funny play. But this was 2024. We are watching the news and we are seeing all of these things that happen in this play playing out in the real world, and it's not funny. We're seeing all these bombings happening, and I'm thinking, why would we put on this play right now? Why are we making this funny? And I realized it's important to do that right now, because what this play is actually about is it's about the feeling of us as passive viewers consuming all of that news, and that feeling of being so oversaturated with these terrible things happening, and this feeling we get of just nonchalance, numbness that's inevitable, that people don't really like to talk about. It's a hard thing to admit, but it's important to talk about that and to talk about things that maybe feel darker in us, that we're more so ashamed of, because only then can we sort of work through it together. And so that's why this play is important. And so I did that kind of journaling, and also, not sure if you guys have been reading that, kind of hope you haven't, but I also like to do an exercise called a planetary exercise, where I take a play and I think, if this play was a planet, what does that look like? What is the atmosphere like? What's the weather like? What are the people like? What languages are spoken? What power structures are there? What caste systems? And I do some journaling and like, what does that look like? And sometimes it comes out more abstract and poetic. Like this one, some of the images that actually came through this thinking ended up influencing the final design. Sometimes it doesn't, but it is always a useful exercise to go through. And then I also like to do sketching as part of this journaling process, where this isn't a sketch of a set. It's just images that kind of come to my mind when I read this play. What does this play feel feel like, and maybe it's more so like a graphic representation that could go on a poster or something. But that just gets the juices flowing, and is another way to start to think about something. And so then from there, after you've done your journaling, after you've done your personal reflection, after you've primed yourself to think about this play in a particular way, you move on to the research phase. And so what that means for me is finding a bunch of different images that, for whatever reason, feel like how the play makes me feel. And then from those images, you find connections. You figure out what it is about those images that makes them feel a certain way. So then you can take that and apply it to your design. And when I was designing this play, I encountered the work of Terry Gilliam. Is anybody familiar with Terry Gilliam or Monty Python at all? So Terry Gilliam is a filmmaker, and he did all the animations for the Monty Python films. And he has a very particular style with, you can see it here, it's these top two images and that bottom right image of this collage, and taking these like old tiny Victorian cutouts and collaging them in humorous ways in unexpected places. And there's also a style of movement in his animations that felt very much like this show did to me that I wanted to take. And then there's also just some images, this one's from a Wes Anderson film, that felt like it was evoking the same type of humor that was in the play. And so you'll see in the final design, there's some things that are stolen directly from these images. Because as a designer, you are stealing. As an artist, you are stealing. You're taking bits and pieces of things that inspire you and you're putting them together by necessity. So after the research phase, I move on to very rough sketches. And you'll see later, sometimes my sketches are more like black and white charcoal, but for this one it felt really important to start to think about how things move, how this world behaves, because by necessity, all of these things that have to happen in this show. So I created this very sketchy, two-dimensional kind of little puppet theater, and I made a bunch of videos like this that I sent to the director just to get the conversation going, and just to start to talk about ideas of how buildings and things can move, and to start to kind of create a composition. And a lot of this ended up in the final design, like that floor there, the sun that's at the center of the proscenium. And by proscenium, I'm talking about like the arch that surrounds the frame around the whole piece. The sun felt important. The very first line in the play is someone saying, oh, the sun is rising on a beautiful day. So that was one of the first decisions that we made and moved forward with. So we move on to sketching. And then we move on to a sketching model. So starting to think in 3 dimensions. And this is an 1/8 inch scale model. This over here is a 1/4 inch scale. So this was teeny tiny, really easy to transport and to show people so that you can make changes and start to work with the director, work with your team, and talk through ideas about how different moments can be dramatized. But it's also starting to solidify the composition and also kind of testing new ideas. So you can see around the proscenium design for this iteration, you can see it's kind of toothy. There's a nose, there's teeth, there's these opera boxes on the sides that ended up in the final design. And that was just an idea I was testing, because I was thinking about the type of humor in this play, and there's something very sinister about it, something that feels a little grotesque. And I was thinking about a lot of political cartoons, and I did so much research I didn't show you guys a lot of it. I was looking at Dr. Seuss's political cartoons, and there's just something toothy about all of them. And also in that initial journaling phase, when I was picturing this planet, that was an image that kept coming up. So I was like, all right, let's just try it out. The only way to see if something works is to throw it out there and see. And some of this stuck, some of this didn't. And then we move on to getting more refined, making more and more decisions to move forward with. And this is a rendering that I made with Procreate and Photoshop. And this is starting to make more decisions about what this proscenium frame is going to look like. And you could see the teeth kind of stuck, those abstract shapes around the sun. That's where that comes from. But some of it was replaced by those laughing faces around the side that also felt sinister, felt like they spoke to this play. And then here is another rendering, and this is where things started to make more sense. So one thing that was important for this play was thinking about scale. As a designer, you have a lot of power to really influence how people behave, how people move on your set. If you think about an opera, we usually design those steps to be 6 inches high. So someone's able to walk down a staircase very gracefully, and they're able to keep singing as they need to. But then you think about something like Pee Wee Herman, who the steps in his sets were huge, so that he would look like a child moving up and down them. So you really start to influence how characters behave in this world. So what I was interested in, if you look at those giant clamshell footlights down below, if you look at this proscenium that kind of comes in pretty low down, these people kind of look like toys playing in a theater. And that felt like a correct decision to go along with the complicated tone of this play. And then the next step in the process, not my favorite step, is drafting. These are technical drawings. All the materials you guys have seen previously, those are useful to show the directors, costume designers, lighting designers, people on your team to communicate what this final thing is going to look like. But you also have to communicate with the people building the set. And depending on the scope of the project, the designer takes on a different role in construction. Sometimes the designer is responsible for building everything themselves. Sometimes the designer doesn't touch anything. A lot of the times the designer paints. That was the case with this show. I just painted it, but I had a team who built it. So we had to move on to drafting. And it's just kind of like architectural blueprints, just drawing out for the people building this show how things need to work, how big they need to be. And this is where you get into the nitty-gritty. You start doing problem solving. You start to see where everything lands, what needs to change, how large things need to be to just logistically work in the space and move how you need them to move. And then from there, we move on to my second favorite phase of the process, which is model building. And the model, and these are some close-up images of the model that's right over here. The model is the most useful tool for the director because this is what they use with some little tiny scale people to start to block out the show, to start to plan compositions of how scenes can work in this world that you built. So that's the modeling process. And then we move on to my absolute favorite part, which is the production process. When all of these things that you've worked for months and months to create start to come to life and start to come to life at the scale that you imagine them to come to. So these are some pictures I took during the painting process for this show. And you start to make some decisions as you're painting your show that you couldn't really make on that smaller scale, like the way the brushwork is playing out and how that calls back to different research that you've looked at. And that's when you get to start making some other little decisions that come through. And on that bottom right image, those giant clamshell footlights, the director actually ended up building those. She made a mold out of recycled bottles and put paper mache on top. So that was really exciting to see how those played out. But they came out kind of chunky and handmade looking, which I actually loved, and it actually really fed into the painting style that we implemented throughout the rest of the set, just that really hand-painted aesthetic. Here are some more process images from this show. A lot of moving pieces that came in. There are these rain clouds that come in for one moment when the character says, oh, it's raining, and then rain clouds come in, and then everything floods, and it's wild. And then we move on to the most gratifying part of being a scenic designer, which is seeing all of this work come together with actors, with costumes, with lighting, with sound, and see your world come to life in ways that you imagined it, but also ways that you never thought possible when your teammates contribute their own ideas and you get to see something take on a life of its own. So this is what that set ended up looking like in context. And here's another production image. This is later in the play after a bunch of stuff has exploded, after the flood has happened. And you can see there's a bunch of balloons on the ground. We actually had a giant balloon drop at one point to represent a bombing that happens in the script, and the balloons were filled with confetti that it did get more serious based on how the actors sold it. So you can see it takes on a completely different tone just by how these actors are behaving. Those balloons feel sinister. These goofy images, they feel sinister now because of the way that these actors are selling it. And also, in case you're wondering about what happens to these pieces after a show, the director actually sent me that image on the left there. She got to keep the sun. Fun fact about me, this is what I wake up to every morning. I don't know what to do with these guys. If anyone wants one, let me know. They're huge. Yeah, so anyways, just to reiterate, going through the steps of the process. First step, journaling, and then research. Then we move on to sketches, and this is a lot of the time what my sketches look like early in the process, these black and white charcoal sketches, just to think sculpturally, think about how light behaves in this world, just to think about effective dramatic scenes. And these are usually the first things that I show to a director just to get the conversation going. And you can see here, a lot of the time, these sketches end up pretty close to the final design. There's changes that happen along the way, but a lot of the time, we move forward with the composition that is presented in this initial early stage. And you can see here is a progression. This was a production of Henry V that we actually set in a summer camp. And that top left image was the very first charcoal sketch. Moving downwards, we move into color rendering. And then we move to the image there on the right, and that is the final production. So you can see how it kind of stayed the same. And you can really trust a lot of the time your initial instincts as a designer. And then it's within the details that things really come together and different things come about. And also contributions from your teammates, their ideas also come through. And then after sketching and rendering, drafting is the next step, which most designers I know don't like drafting. No matter what you guys do, there's going to be something about it that you do not enjoy. I am not somebody who likes being on a laptop for hours and hours and hours, getting into the nitty-gritty of things and figuring things out, but maybe that's what you're into. I know some people do really like that kind of problem solving, and sometimes it can be satisfying to draft out these images and to problem solve. But then we move on to model building from the drafting and accurate scale model building to present to the director. And this is a fun part of design because you get to make cute little mini things like that mini jukebox, a little mini band. And some of these models I actually built for a designer who I assist. When you work as a designer, you can make some extra money assisting other designers, so you do their drafting and model building for them. And that's also a way when you're starting out to learn a lot. And then we move on to the production, the scenic painting, the scenic building. And these are all from a production of Hairspray that I worked on. And I still think that whoopee cushion might be one of the best things I've ever painted. And it's kind of unfortunate, but it's fine. But that's the part of the process that I find exciting because then you get to see everything come together.
10 minutes.
10 minutes?
Yep.
Everything come together into the final image. And then here's that set again populated by people, and you can see how it feels different when there are people on stage. And in addition to being a stage designer, I also work a lot as a painter, which is really exciting because you never know what you're going to be asked to paint next. You might paint SpongeBob's pineapple, you might paint this old tiny coin, but that's something that I find really exciting, and it's also a really helpful way to make a living as a designer. And sometimes this was a non-theatrical project I got hired to do. This was for a social club downtown called the Soho House. They hired me to design an entryway exhibit for their New Year's party, which was very garden themed. So this was me kind of in my aunt's basement with a can of spray foam, figuring out how to make a tree, how to load it up into a car, make some paintings, and then just kind of use skills that you learn working in theater to do something non-theatrical. And again, going back to theater, it's exciting because you never know what you're going to be asked to make next. For instance, this was for a production of Waitress. I got hired to make all of these fake pies, and I didn't know how to make a fake pie when they hired me, but you figure it out. Working in theater, you are tasked with a sometimes you do more serious type work, and you do, I would call these set designs more sculptural, more lyrical. These are a very different tone of play, but I wanted to include this just to show you guys the versatility of this art form and the different types of emotions that you can evoke. And so I wanted to return to this question of why do we make art? Because we talked about making scale models of this world. We talked about taking broken bits and pieces and putting them together. We talked about expressing ourselves. But I included this particular painting on this slide because this painting was a gift that I made for one of my mentors who's a lighting designer. This was a moment that he was particularly proud of from a production of Cabaret. So I did this painting for him and I gave it to him as a gift. And that's really what I think is the ultimate driver of why we make art. Because for whatever reason, we feel compelled to give a gift to people. We create something that we think is beautiful, that we think is meaningful, that we think says something that needs to be said, and we are generous, and we give it to people. And I wanted to end with this production of Little Mermaid just because it opens next week. And this is the scenic rendering. Here is a little process photo I took painting this weekend. But, here's also a little puppetry design. But think about this. This is something that the person fabricating this puppet, this feels like getting some milk out like getting a gift. It created something that obviously brings him joy, brings me joy. It's going to bring a lot of children joy. And ultimately, that's what we're here to do. Maybe not, if it's not joy, we're here to share something. And so I'm going to conclude by compelling all of you, whether or not you go into theater or theater design, you are all deeply creative people, and it is not only your right, but it is your responsibility to go forth in this world and create whatever that means to you. And I encourage you to be generous, because not only is it good for the world, but it's good for you. And thank you all so much. Does anybody have any questions? Yeah.
How many people do you work with in your groups and design?
It depends. So usually on the production team, there's the director, and then there's usually a costume designer, a lighting designer. Sometimes there's a projection designer, a sound designer. And then depending on the scope of the project, there is a number of carpenters. There's usually someone who's called a technical director, who's in charge of managing the build of something. You usually have a few painters on your team as well. And then there's the cast, who you sometimes interact with. The costume designer usually interacts with the cast more than the scenic designer, but that's also really exciting. But it depends on the scope of the project. I've worked on a few where it's been 5 of us. I've worked on a few where I'd say the team has been about 50 people. But that's also something really exciting about working in theater, is being able to work with other people and to listen to their ideas, see your ideas bounce off of them, take their ideas, bounce them off of yours. It's really gratifying to be in a creative field where you're constantly working with other people and not just kind of in your own echo chamber, creating paintings of things you see in your head. Anyone else? Yeah.
What's your favorite production that you worked on?
Ooh. It was probably Piggy, the one I showed you guys. Just not just because that one was so crazy and also got to reference kind of old-timey Baroque theater design that I find really exciting, and I always try to bring it in whenever I can. This one, this image from here was also really exciting. This was a devised production at my college that was about the college's history. And I did scenic and puppetry design for this, and we had three of these old-timey overhead projectors back there that we would put shadow puppets on and manipulate with rods. Is anyone here familiar with Manual Cinema? They are a really, really cool company in Chicago, and they do these multimedia shadow puppetry productions, and they've done stuff for film as well. But I encourage you guys to check them out. We were really deeply inspired by them for this production.
I think that's all the time we have.
Cool.
Perfect. What do do you guys say?
Thank you.
Woo! Clap, 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 clap. All right. Oh, River. Actually, can I get 2 theater students to help me? You guys grab this box. Oh, River, I didn't see you there. You grab this box, put it out there, and put the tablecloth on it. River will do the tablecloth. Well, yeah, we found out about. Yes. Yeah, that's okay. Oh yeah, 'cause we got. I forgot you have one more. You didn't know. You can actually leave that out though if you want. Or why don't we safely just move it to the side?
Or I just like center.
Sure, right there is fine. All right.
Oh wait.
Oh, do you have the Lucy?
Oh, yeah.
Do you have the clicker dongle still? Oh.
Oh, it looks like it's on.
Oh, gotcha. Thank you. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, you guys good. Thank you. Enjoy your lunch. When you go to airplane, what do you hit? Oh, never mind. Got it. You have a fancy new one. It's not hiding. Okay. And do you want tire here? All right, we're good. And then plug that in, and you just have to say say allow, and then say quit. It's not a keyboard, but it's kind of cool because you can even take this and move the mouse around. Amazing. Yeah. And it's forward, backward. Right. It was so funny. I thought it was your class in here at first. And no, first, I'm like, oh, yeah. And then, Connie, it is up to you if you want to do mic or no mic. Mic. There's a lot of kids. Mic is. Hey, Nick. For it. Testing, testing, testing. What up, fam? There we go. It works. How's life? Oh. How's life, everybody? Good. 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 I moved. Blue, so he kind of can't. Cool kid. My dog. It's a real son. Jeez. Well, now you gotta look at a picture of him. Here he is. Right in front of the field. We went for some bowling. It's some stripes. With, I get it. With bumpers, though. He did. All right. I'll let you decide. Hi, everybody. Grab a seat, grab a seat, grab a seat. All right. So, day 2 of Spark Week. I hope you have been to a few things already and kind of enjoyed yourself. Before we get started, if your teacher has not yet, can you guys throw your cell phones in your pockets and give our presenters your best attention and best respect, because that's what they deserve. Okay, so joining us this hour is Connie Richardson. She's the debut author of Rapid City Summer. Here, hold up your book so they can see it. Ta-da! Ta-da! She teaches middle school English in Lake Zurich, And when she's not teaching or writing, she enjoys fly fishing out west, running, coaching cross country and track and field, and cooking with family and friends. So enjoy. And she's a teacher, so be careful. Be careful. I'll let you decide on the mic.
Okay. All right. Can you guys hear me okay without the mic? Yeah. Okay.
Perfect.
Then we'll go without. All right. Well, good afternoon. A lot of fishing and fly fishing today. And does anyone here know what fly fishing is or has been fly fishing before? You guys can raise your hand. I'm going to encourage participation. I'm going to bribe you with candy, so don't be afraid to participate at Times School. All right, so a few of you, and if you have no idea what we're talking about, I'm going to explain. There's going to be videos, all sorts of cool stuff. So we'll do a little about me before we get into all of the fishing and writing talk. So again, like Mr. New said, I'm an English teacher in Lake Zurich. I've been teaching middle school English for about a decade and also taught high school a little bit at the start of my career. I mentor other writers as well, so I don't just write, but I help other writers write books and memoirs and help them achieve their dreams of being a published author too. I coach cross country and I ran at UW-Platteville when I was in college, so I have some college athletics experience, and again, published author of Rapid City Summer. This past summer, I got married in Montana, so I highly recommend when that time comes for you, go have a destination wedding with all your family and friends. It was a great time. Got married in Big Sky, Montana. And last year, too, my first novel, Rapid City Summer, was published by Black Rose Writing. I'm currently writing my next book, which I'll talk to you guys a little about, which is a young adult dystopian sports book. So if you like the Hunger Games or Uglies or just anything with sports, that might be something you'll be interested in down the road. I enjoy fly fishing, ice fishing, and muskie fishing. Does anyone here know what muskie fishing is or has caught a muskie? All right, they're basically like a super, super big fish with a lot of teeth. Can be kind of scary looking, but super fun to catch. So for reference, my biggest muskie I've caught is 40 inches, so they get pretty massive and pretty fun to catch. Question for all of you and your first chance at some Nerds Gummy Clusters. Any guesses at my favorite musical artist? And this is going to be an important question because we're going to come back to this later. Guesses at my favorite artist? Yeah. No, not Noah Kahn. Good guess. Any guesses? Okay, two more. Yeah, what's your guess? Not Zach Bryan, but yeah, I do like Zach Bryan. That's a good guess. One more. Yeah. Not Morgan Wallen. It is actually. I'll take one more over here. No, it's actually, I'm a Swiftie. Taylor Swift. So that's going to be important later. So we'll get to that. There's a reason why I brought that up. Okay, a little bit too about me as a reader and as a writer. So I like to write books that have teen characters. I'm a young adult author. I work with middle schoolers, so those are the types of characters and people I like to write about. Books with sports, again, I coached cross country. I played volleyball when I was in high school. I ran track and field. I played tennis and softball, and I danced. I'm a very active person. Books with interesting family dynamics. My parents were divorced growing up, and I lived with my grandma all through my childhood, so we had a multi-generational family home, so just kind of family dynamics and family drama I find super, super interesting. And then books where the reader's going to learn something new, and books that leave readers inspired and hopeful. So when I was in high school, when I was your age, I didn't read a lot, and that was for a couple of reasons. One, I was super busy. Like I said, I played sports, classes, like I was in honors and AP classes, so that kept me super busy. But I also had a hard time finding books that I just really enjoyed and was interested in. How many of you feel the same way? Like it's tough to find books that like you want to read or that you think are interesting. Like it's okay, to be honest, right? Like I know it's tough to find books that kind of grab your attention. These were a few of those books for me when I was in high school. So I loved The Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants. All of these books are also movies too, which is great. So that was one of my favorite series growing up. I loved Twilight. I was Team Jacob, so Twilight was a favorite series, and The Hunger Games. So those were all kind of coming out when I was growing up, and I enjoyed those a lot too. But even prior to that, I just enjoyed reading and writing as a kid. When I was in elementary school, we had a program called Young Authors, where they give you just kind of a blank hardcover book, and you just get to write a story. Did they do that when you guys were in school too? Did anyone do anything? Like a few of you? Okay. so you had that experience. So these were a few of my young authors' books. So I think The Puppy I wrote when I was in kindergarten or first grade, so, and also just great artwork, super proud of that one. Practice and Your Dreams Will Come True was another story that I wrote. And then the bottom one is Mission Time Out in Alaska, the Beanie Babies story. So I know Neatos are kind of all the rage and like fidgets and things, so you guys collect those. When I was growing up, it was Beanie Babies. That was all the rage. That's what we collected. So I wrote a whole book about that. My 3 young authors books that I have over here, I know they all seem very different, but does anyone have any guesses for what all of those books have in common? Because there's something that all 3 of those books have in common. Any guesses? Guesses what they all, yeah, what's your guess? Say that one more time. No, not that. And another guess? Any others? Yeah.
Maybe for perseverance.
Maybe a little bit of perseverance. Great guess. Not quite. Here, one more. Any others? Yeah, that's you. Was it, say that one more time? Yeah, you can kind of learn something from it. So a little bit of that, things that you can learn from, but also all 3 of those books were about things that I was just like really, really interested in and passionate about at the time. So when I wrote The Puppy, that wasn't long after I got my dog growing up. Like I said, I loved Beanie Babies and collected Beanie Babies. And then I played tennis for a lot of my childhood too, so that inspired that book. So kind of connecting now to what inspired my novel, Rapid City Summer. And I'll tell you a little bit of what my book is about too, since I haven't done that yet. So it's about a 15-year-old girl, her name's Natalie, who moves from the Chicago suburbs to Rapid City, South Dakota. Has anyone been to South Dakota here, gone to Mount Rushmore or the Badlands or headed out that way? So it's a super beautiful area. If you've never been, highly recommend. And it's right after her freshman year of high school. And how many, are there any underclassmen here, freshmen, sophomores, kind of the age range? So few of you, right? And the rest of you, if you're upperclassmen, then you kind of know. Like after freshman year, you're kind of, settling in, figuring things out, finding your way. That's right when Natalie has to move. So she's getting situated on the track team, she has her friend group, and then her mom gets a new job, and then they have to move across the country. She's not happy about it at all. So on top of that move, they end up also moving close to her grandma, who she doesn't really have a relationship with, and you find out why in the book, but now they live 10 minutes away from this grandma, who she has no relationship with. So it's about her navigating that. She meets her next door neighbor, Adam, so they kind of become friends. There's a little like will they, won't they, a little bit of that in the book. But then also she finds her footing through fly fishing and being in the outdoors in this book too. So some things that inspired me to write Rapid City Summer were things that I wanted in a book, but I couldn't find. So anyone who wants to create something in here, whether it's writing or whatever your thing or passion is, I highly recommend you to think about like, what do you wish was out there that's not, but also things that you are just like obsessed with and are super interested in, right? So I wanted to write a book that was set in Western states. Don't see a lot of books that are set in Montana or in South Dakota, so part of this book's also set in Montana. Natalie and Adam and Adam's dad, they go on this fly fishing trip in the book out to Montana, so wanted to just write about those settings. I also wanted examples of strong friendships in stories. Like I said, The Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants was one of my favorite books, because I just love the friendship of the girls in those stories and just seeing examples of good friendships, because I know how tough that can be too, to like find your friends and maintain that friend group and navigate all of that. So I wanted to kind of include those things in the book too. And then of course fly fishing, right? Because that's one of my favorite things to do, and wanted to show readers that through this book too, because I love reading books where you get to learn about a new topic and learn something new. So highly recommend, if you want to write or want to create something, write what you know really well, but things that you're obsessed with too, because then that's going to come through in your writing and make that really engaging for your reader. Okay? Before we go any further, I'm going to do a quick intro on what fly fishing is and watch this video just to give you some context for some other things we're going to talk about today. So what is fly fishing and how is it different than regular fishing? So it's a style of fishing where the bait is going to mimic the actual bugs in the water. So you're not going to throw kind of like plastics or worms. How many of you just gone regular fishing with like a bobber or a worm, or you go bass fishing, right? So we're more familiar with that, okay? So fly fishing, and I brought like my baits too, so you guys can see, because there's something in here we're going to talk about. This is where the bait mimics the bugs and the aquatic insects that the fish eat. It's about having a really natural presentation for the fish. Fly fishing is mainly used to catch trout. You can catch a lot of different species of fish through fly fishing, but we're going to talk a lot about trout today. So we'll watch this video so you guys can get an illustration for kind of what this looks like.
Oh, he's going nuts. So I'm on this beautiful river, and there are a ton of caddis just bouncing up and down on top of the water. And I know the fish are eating them because I can see them coming up and just smacking caddis right off the water surface. So I'm gonna tie on a caddis dry fly, just a single dry fly, because I want my presentation to be absolutely perfect. We're gonna chuck it up there and see if we can get a fish.
Of what that's like, and that's actually a style of fly fishing called dry fly fishing, where they're eating the bugs off of the surface. So you have these flies that just kind of sit at the top, and then the fish just come up right to the top and then eat them, and you can catch them that way. And then that's the type of trout he caught is called a cutthroat trout, because I know you can kind of see a little bit here, but right under its jaw, it's kind of got these like orange cuts, kind of like its throat is cut. So that's how that trout has its name. And then we're going to talk about, here's a little fishing story for me. So this is the biggest brown trout that I have caught on the fly. I've caught one a little bit bigger, actually ice fishing. Little secret to you guys, because I also live in Grays Lake, I didn't tell you guys that. But just over the border in Wisconsin, you can fish the harbors of Lake Michigan and Racine and Kenosha. Once those freeze up, the ice fishing, you can catch fish like that big and these kinds of trout through the ice in those harbors. So a few years ago, caught one a little bit bigger than that. But any guesses how big that fish is? Any guesses? Any guesses? Yeah. How much? Not 40, so it's smaller than that. Not 40. I mean, I have caught one that big. Yeah, what's your guess? 35. Not 35, smaller than that. Yeah. Not 12 pounds, we'll go inches. Inches, take one more, yeah. 32. Not 32, good guess, a little smaller. I know it looks big. Looks big here, yeah. 28. You're close, it's 24, so 2 feet, yeah, 24 inches. So we're gonna talk about how I caught this fish, because the story is, it's a little goofy how I caught this, but it required 4 things to catch this fish. It took a lot of perseverance, it took trying different strategies, it took asking for a lot of help, and it just took some showing up to get the job done. So my husband is also a teacher and a coach, so every summer we head out west and we fly fish. That's just kind of what we do over the summer. Take 2 or 3 weeks, hit the road, go fishing all day, every day, in places that are just like a lot cooler than Illinois, I'll be honest. So here we were in Utah on the Green River, which is known for having fantastic dry fly fishing, like you just saw in that video that we watched, where the fish are just coming up and eating off the surface all the time, and you can catch fish that are this big like all day, every day. However, the year we went, this was maybe 3 years ago, I think so, in 2023, that was not the case at all. We had a very cold year, so you can tell like I'm wearing a jacket, I've got a hoodie on underneath. It's maybe like 45 degrees, and this is the middle of June. Very, very cold the day we were out and the year that we went. We were also dealing with a lot of flooding on this river, so the water was really high, which just impacts how the fish are behaving. So we were expecting to go and catch just lots of fish on these dry flies and have that kind of fishing experience, except when we showed up, the weather wasn't obviously cooperating, and neither was the fishing. So that required us to try lots of different strategies. We had to think about what flies we were going to use, kind of how deep we were going to set some of the flies that were under the water, the different spots we were going to fish with the water being flooded and just not being able to fish on some shore parts that were now underwater. So it was getting very, very frustrating. We were in Utah, I think like 3 or 4 days. So our first day of the trip, caught absolutely no fish. We got skunked. So required some perseverance just to keep going and not give up. But obviously that was getting very frustrating. We also had to ask for help from the fly shop, so it's kind of like a bait shop, saying like, hey, the river's flooded, what should we do? What should we throw? And then they recommended a fly that's gonna be really hard for you guys to see, but it's this big. You can barely see it as I'm walking around. It's called a scud. And it's basically kind of like a little gnat that lives right under the water and just sits on the bottom of the river. And they're like, you need to throw this. And you need to let it sit all the way at the bottom and let it sit maybe 18 to 24 inches off the end of your line. And good luck, and that's gonna catch fish. And my now husband and I were like, are you kidding? Like, there's no way that this is gonna catch fish. This is ridiculous. But we're like, you know what? We're out of ideas, so we're going to try it. Okay, so we got back out on the water the next day. We're hoping for the best, but not expecting much. If you guys look in this picture, there's a boulder right behind me. So after a certain point, I'm like, you know what? I need to try and see the water better, so I'm gonna climb up onto this boulder and I'm going to cast. So I decided to climb up onto that boulder. Before I did, I took my rod, and this part's important. So I had the line still hanging out, and then my bait was in the water as I'm climbing up on top of this boulder. So I'm climbing, I get on top of the boulder so I can kind of see the fish and my surroundings a little bit better, because sometimes when you have an aerial view, it's a lot easier to see what you are kind of, casting at and maybe see fish in the water. And then when I got on top of that boulder, I go to pick up my rod, and all of a sudden, the bottom is snagged. So I think I'm snagged on this rock. I got caught on like some of the debris or just some of the greenery, and I'm just kind of trying to yank my rod, like trying to get it out of whatever snag I have, and I'm super frustrated. I've climbed on top of this rock. All I want to do is try and catch a fish, and now I'm snagged and I can't even take a cast. So once I try and get my snag out again, all of a sudden, my snag starts moving, and out comes that fish on the end of my line. It ate the bait as it was under the rock, and then just kind of shot out straight in front of me. And I was like, all right, fish on, let's go. So we're fighting in this fish. My husband ends up getting a net on it and ended up having a fantastic day. That was pretty much, that was one of 3 fish we caught over like a 4-day period of time, but that fish was better than no fish at all. But required just all of these different things to not give up and to make it happen, right? But the thing is, when you want to write a book or you want to create something, it takes all of these same things too. Perseverance, trying different strategies, asking for help, and showing up. These same things apply to writing a book and creating, okay? So when I wrote Rapid City Summer, when I wrote the first draft of this book about 4 years ago in 2021, got 2 questions for you. So first, how long do you think it took me to write the first draft of this book, just to write a first draft? What do you think? Yeah, what's your guess?
I want to say around 3 months or so.
You're close. Not 3 months, but you are close. Yeah, what's your guess? 4.5 months was what it took to write the first draft of Rapid City Summer. So I'll give you good job. So 4.5 months to write the first draft. Here you go. And any guesses on how many words was that draft? So it took me 4.5 months to, you have guesses on how many words that book was, yeah.
When you mean first draft, do you mean by the full story or half or part of it?
The whole story, yeah.
Okay, so that's drastically increasing the number.
Yeah, so what's your guess?
I want, okay, trying to think of what the average story is. Someone else can guess it.
Okay, yeah, what's your guess? Did you say 35? Or so in 30, okay, so it's over 30,000 words. Over 30,000. Do you have a guess?
Like 43,000.
Good guess, but more than that, more than 43, yeah.
60K.
It was 58,000, so I'll give that to you. So 58,000 words in 4.5 months, right? So we're gonna talk about how that happens too. So I know you're like, wow, that's good. Okay. So 4.5 months to write this first draft and 58,000 words. So we're gonna talk about what that looks like too, and just, I know it sounds kind of ridiculous, and I'm gonna tell you some other things that are a little ridiculous too to this process. So, again, in fishing and in writing, both require perseverance. So in fishing, like I talked about with this brown trout, you don't just catch your biggest fish the first time you go fishing. It takes going out on the water a lot and continuing to try again and learn from your mistakes. Many days you don't catch fish, big fish or a lot of fish, but that doesn't mean you give up and just like kind of throw all your equipment away and just kind of give up on something you're really interested in and passionate about. And the same thing goes for writing. You also don't write your best story or article or essay or whatever you're working on in your English classes, journalism, all your other classes where you write, the first time that you sit down to write and create something. It's just, I wish it were that easy. Unfortunately, it's not. Especially when you're writing a book, the first draft is essentially you telling yourself the story. It's not going to be your best writing, and it's not going to be writing that you really want to share with others, but it needs to happen in order to get to the heart of the story, to be able to say what you are trying to say. That has to be part of the process. So even on the days where writing is really hard or the words aren't making sense to you, to just keep going and keep writing, even when your words feel forced, awkward, or just don't make any sense. It's important not to give up on that process. So along with that, it's also involving trying different strategies. So in fishing, kind of like I talked about, it's trying different baits. Are we gonna fish with like a fly that goes under the water or on the top of the water like we saw in that video? Looking at bait size, color, the time of day you're fishing, the location where you're fishing, all of those things impact success. Same with writing. So if you're working on a first draft and just kind of getting that story out the first time, or if you're revising and finding ways to make it better, things I'm asking myself are, do I need more dialogue? Do I need more instances of people talking? Do I need more what we call interiority, where the character is kind of just telling us what they are thinking or feeling in that particular scene? Do we need more action, where characters are doing things and we're not just talking about characters like doing things, so they're actually having those actions, and just different points of view, whether that's first person, third person, those sorts of things. And how you write. I brought with me, because I told you I'm working on another book right now. It's in here. It's in this notebook. Sometimes the process of actually writing needs to change in order to get the job done. When I wrote Rapid City Summer, I typed all of that on my computer. But now I am handwriting my next book. Here it is. Here's part of it right here, right on the page, okay? So sometimes handwriting the story, and this is how I get through so many words in such a short amount of time, because in a notebook, there's no backspace, there's no delete. I just have to keep writing and keep going forward. I'm scribbling things out, I'm writing notes on the other side, and that's really helping me get this next book out that I'm working on, because I realized typing it wasn't going to help my creative process. So I decided to do something different, and now I'm writing in a notebook, and that's making all of the difference. And it's kind of fun to try something new and try that different strategy. So sometimes the method in which you're writing, when you write, getting up in the morning, afternoon or after school when you get home, in the evenings, kind of as your day is winding down, and thinking about the types of goals you're setting too. So whether you're a writer or an athlete or just in terms of like school and stuff, if you have a goal you're working toward and you're having trouble getting to that goal, think about the types of goals you're setting. So even with writing, word count goals sometimes help me, but also just the amount of time I'm working on something too. Saying I'm gonna write for 30 minutes or I'm gonna write for 15 minutes and just keeping it at that minute goal, or pages in a notebook. Like I'm gonna write 2 pages in my notebook today, right? And just kind of keep it small and simple, but thinking about the types of goals you're setting can also make all of the difference. Something else to consider is notice that I didn't say I was just thinking about doing all of these things. It's actually going and trying these different strategies, not just thinking about them, but action, okay? Thinking about these changes only gets you so far. Action is what's going to get you results. Even if it's not ultimately what you are like going to do, just any action is going to give you answers and give you some results, okay? This also requires asking for help. So in fishing, it's learning from experts, it's watching YouTube videos, it's going and talking to other people who fish, going to these bait shops or fly shops and saying, hey, what are the baits that are working? What are people catching fish with? Are there parts of this river I should try? And it can be really hard to ask for help and say, hey, like, I can't figure this out, and just kind of humble yourself to say, hey, like, I need someone else's guidance or experience. And then practicing, but also listening to feedback, right? How many of you get comments from like your teacher on like a paper or an assignment, and then you read them and you kind of like roll your eyes and you're like, yeah, whatever, like I'm not gonna do that. You guys, like I did that when I was in school, like I've done that in college classes, right? Like sometimes you get feedback and you don't know what to do with it, you don't want to use it, or you're like, I'm not gonna do that and I'll still get whatever grade, right? But it's also just taking the time to learn from that feedback and do something with it to get the results you are looking for. So same thing goes for writing. That's learning from experts. If you want to write, you need to read. Good writing requires reading and learning from the books that you are reading. So reading a lot, reading in the genre that you want to write. So if you want to write science fiction, read a lot of science fiction, right? So read the things that you want to write. Practice writing, just spend time like typing on the computer, writing in your notebook, even if it's just journaling, getting words on the page, and listening to the to feedback when it is time for feedback. When I'm working on a first draft, I rarely ask for feedback or an editor to look at something or someone to give me comments on what I'm writing, because I just need time to figure out the story. So sometimes I'll brainstorm with a trusted friend or another writer if I'm stuck and need help figuring out where to go next. But oftentimes I don't have someone give me actual feedback on the story until I'm in revising and taking that first version of the story that's done and making it better. Okay? And that's just continuing to show up. So in fishing, you're not gonna catch a fish if you're just sitting like at home and you're not on the water. In writing, you're not gonna write a book if you're not opening your computer or you're not opening your notebook and getting words on the page. You need to show up because you want to, because you enjoy it, because you want to get better, because you want to reach a goal. You need to think about your why and why you are spending time in whatever hobby or craft that you are working on. You also don't need to be shouting about it on social media all the time or making YouTube videos saying like, hey, here's me like writing in my notebook or practicing this sport, right? There's a time and place, I think, sometimes to show those accomplishments and show those things, but we don't need to do that all the time. It's important to keep your process sacred of like practicing writing, practicing your sport, practicing your activity, whatever it is, and just keeping that between you and whatever your thing is. Like I said, if you're a writer, an athlete, a musician, just spending time between you and your craft. Which brings me to, who remembers my favorite artist? Yes, I'm a Swiftie, okay? Proud to admit it. And there's a few reasons why. So we're gonna pivot from fishing, go to Taylor for a little bit. So one reason why Taylor's my favorite artist, and I'm gonna give you guys a trick here. So if you get anything out of this presentation, here's a trick when you go to concerts. She was hands down the best concert I've ever been to, but I also had the best seats at this Taylor Swift concert. So when I was 18, right after I graduated high school, my friends and I, it was a group of 6 of us, we got tickets to see Taylor after her Speak Now album came out, the original, not Taylor's version. So after that album came out, we got tickets to her concert, which were way easier to get than they are now. We drove up to Milwaukee. We were one of the first people at the stadium where the concert was. So we go to our seats, which are nosebleeds, right? We just graduated high school, we had no money, nosebleeds were all we could afford. We get to our seats, we're one of the first people in the stadium, and then Taylor's people are walking around. And then they come up to us and they're like, hey, are these your seats? And we're like, yeah. And they're like, well, do you want upgrades to your seats? And I'm like, duh, of course I want an upgrade. So they're like, here's pit passes, enjoy. So then we got free pit passes to see Taylor Swift. So lesson to all of you, get to concerts early and maybe the artist's people will find you and give you free pit passes. Always worth a try, always worth a try. So incredible show, great experience. She's also a really good writer. If you spend time just like reading or kind of looking at Taylor Swift's lyrics, she's a fantastic writer. So I admire that about her. But also over the weekend, Taylor won a bunch of awards at the iHeartRadio Music Awards. And she said something really powerful in her speech that connects to what we're talking about today and how we just show up in our writing, our inner craft.
And I just want to say, like, when I was 12 years old, I had the luxury of spending thousands of hours working at my craft, practicing, making mistakes through trial and error. And that was all completely unobserved. right? So that was just me and my craft. And I'm looking out into this crowd and I'm seeing so many ambitious, cool, smart, awesome people who have dreams. And like we live in this world where there's so much immediate feedback constantly. Like you get feedback for everything you share with the world now. Like everything you post, you get feedback, whether it's good or bad or whatever. I just want to say, if I had one hope for you, I would say that I hope that you get to nurture your hobby and your passion just between you and that craft. And you give yourself time. Give yourself time to make mistakes. Give yourself time to hone your craft. I'm a firm believer that anything you feed your mind, it will internalize. Anything you feed the internet, it will attempt to kill. And I don't want that for your dreams.
All of you guys too. So don't be posting about things all the time. Just spend time practicing whatever you want to practice, and that can get you really, really far. It's those hours spent. I don't know if anyone knows like the 10,000 hour rule, that sometimes it takes that long to become a master or kind of perfect your craft, but just spend time doing what you love to do, and that's just how you get better at things. Okay? So we talked about writing that first draft of Rapid City Summer, but then like those 58,000 words were a hot mess, and it took a lot of work to make those into a publishable book. So my next question for you is, if it took me 4.5 months to just write the first draft of Rapid City Summer, how many years did it take to revise it until I signed a publishing contract? How many years? I will tell you, because that's kind of the first hint. So years, what's your guess? No, more than 1 year. I wish it was 1 year, but it was more than that. Yeah, what's your guess? More than 2. More than 2. Yes. Not 5 years. I'll talk through the math. The math, I promise. Yeah.
3.5.
You're good. 3.5 years. It took 3.5 years to revise this book until we kind of got to where we are now, right? All right. And one more question. What was the biggest change that I made to this story? I'll tell you guys, and I'll take a couple guesses. What's one of the biggest changes you think I made in this 3.5 year revision process? Yeah.
The title.
Not the title. So the title I actually came up with early on with some help from people, and that actually stuck for a very long time. So not the title, but that's a fantastic guess, because titles usually change, right? Yeah, what's your guess?
Just like the characters.
So the characters in general, the biggest change I made was the age of Natalie, my main character. So she was not always a 15-year-old girl who just finished her freshman year of high school. She actually started a little bit younger. Her original age was 14, and you wouldn't think there's a big difference between 14 and 15, but in terms of publishing, there is. I won't bore you with all of those details, but after some trial and error, and again, asking for help and getting feedback when it was time for feedback, I came to the conclusion that Natalie had to be a little bit older and kind of make all of those characters really solidly in high school in order for this story to work. So that was kind of one of the biggest rewrites I had to do, was the age of the characters and kind of that timeline to help with that part of the story. And then after all of that time in revision, which did involve after signing the publishing contract too, but how many rejections did Rapid City Summer receive before I finally signed a publishing contract? How many rejections did I get from agents and publishing houses until
Sorry,
I got
this
in
isn't my
this?
guess, but 10 minutes.
Yeah.
That's not what I'm saying, 10
Yeah,
minutes.
go ahead. Did more than 10 and more than 15? Oh, more than 10 and more than 15. Yeah. More than 21? Yeah.
35.
More than 35? More than 50? Yeah.
67.
It's actually close to this many. It's 65. 65. So. All right. Yeah. So 65 rejections before I signed a contract to publish Rapid City Summer. So again, what it took to revise and pitch that book, all of these things. So kind of seeing a trend. Lots of things take perseverance, trying strategies, asking for help, and showing up. So just kind of quickly in the revision and pitching process, what did that look like that's a little bit different than just writing the book in general? So perseverance. I got used to hearing hearing no. I am now very comfortable with rejection. I'm comfortable with people telling me no. I have a very thick skin, and it was all because of this process, right? Just kind of knowing that the no's are not personal. A lot of it is writing and publishing a book is a business, and you just kind of learn that and get used to it. But now, no doesn't bother me, rejections don't faze me, right? And kind of learning that process. Trying different strategies. In total, there are 5 different drafts of this book. From the very first book to the first version of telling this story to the one that's now published today. There are 5 different versions of it, so going back and changing lots of different things about the characters and things about the timeline of the story, and adding in scenes, taking scenes out, adding more words, right? I queried, which is a fancy word for just kind of like pitching or asking agents and small presses before signing a publishing contract, asking for help from friends, from people who have published books before, from editors, to try and figure out what it would take to find this book its home so it could get published. And then just continuing to show up because I believed in myself as a writer, that this was a dream I had that I would never give up on. I believed in this story so much that I wanted to tell this story of Natalie and moving out west and learning how to fly fish and just living life outside your comfort zone. And all of these lessons, I hope that teen readers and readers of all ages get a chance to experience. And I just never gave up on that dream, even on days when it got really, really difficult, right? So writers, don't give up. If you have a dream, don't give up on it. Good things often take time to create and to put into the world, okay? So in conclusion, whether you want to write or pursue a different passion, these are some things that I hope you walk away with today. Please don't forget to love what you do if you are really passionate about something. I know you're all not gonna go out and write a book one day, which is fine, but whatever your thing is, love it and stick with it. Keep persevering, try different strategies, ask for help, keep showing up without constantly asking for feedback or posting about it on social media. Just spend that time in your craft and never give up on you, your dreams, and your story. Thank you.
I have a question. Sorry, Grace was too nervous to ask. She is also a big time Swiftie.
Nice.
Wants to know what your favorite song is in hopes that it's also hers.
Just one song.
Your favorite Swift
It's
song.
like asking, like, I don't have kids, but it's like asking your favorite child. I don't know if I can give you a song, but I'd say my favorite album. Can I do album? Both. Okay, what's yours? Tortured Poets, yes, that one's good too. But Folklore is my favorite.
Did I miss the time you were thinking questions on?
No, we can actually, I don't know if we have time for more questions. Do we have time for more questions?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, yeah, are there any questions? Yes.
Okay, so in terms of like stories in general, I think you're right spot in your slide, but what is like a list you have of the most influential stories you have for your work?
Okay, so it's a great question. So just kind of like what influences me the most?
Yeah, what influenced your work and what made you have your style of writing per se?
My style of writing. Yeah, okay, so a couple of things I think that influence my style of writing. I can be kind of a stubborn person, so I like to create things that I don't see out in the world today. So that was one inspiration, again, for Rapid City Summer. I didn't see stories that were set in certain parts of the country and places that I love to visit and travel to, and wanted to share that with readers. So that's why it's set in South Dakota and Montana. But just also my love for the outdoors and sports and being active also influences my work a lot. So even my next book that I'm working on, there's a lot of sports in it. So do I have any track and field athletes in here? All right, so there's a lot of track in my next book. So, because I ran track and cross country, so that influences my writing a lot. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I was thinking about like other like things like other books and such that those help your stories.
Oh, other books, yeah. So authors that I don't know if there's a particular author, but I just like to read a lot, and just fiction in general just kind of inspires my work. So I just like to read and kind of take a little bit of something from all the different books I read. So it's not just like one in particular, but just lots of reading, and reading a lot's going to help you become a better writer. I just want to make sure we got time for other questions. Yeah, one up there. story, then what do you do to not kind of like overwhelm the reader? And I think a lot of that is just, and it's not the best writing advice, but it is at the same time, it's showing versus telling. So instead of like info dumping a lot about your characters, you want to show them like having conversations with each other, then an action, even when they think of other characters, and then just kind of from the act of whatever they're doing and their interactions with other characters, that can kind of like prevent that overwhelm of like, wow, there's a lot of people to keep track of and things like that in here, and that can help balance it out a lot instead of being like, this person's like blah blah blah, and then this person's like blah blah blah. So just kind of showing and just kind of gradually introducing people as you go to help prevent overwhelm from the reader. But keep writing and keep working on it. That's awesome. Any others? Yeah, go ahead.
When you're writing a book, if you have a lot of different kind of disconnected ideas, how would you go about like consolidating them into one?
Yeah, okay, so great question. So if you have a lot of ideas and it feels disconnected, how do you go and connect it? So something that I like to do in writing is having something that's called a big question. So if you kind of have an overarching question or topic that you're exploring. So for Rapid City Summer, that question was about kind of the risks and rewards of living outside your comfort zone and taking chances. What are the risks of taking chances? What can you gain and lose from that? And how that impacts your characters. So I could say for my main character, if she takes a chance, this is how it's going to impact her. Her next door neighbor, Adam, if he takes chances, here's how that might backfire. And thinking about the personalities of your characters and how they might address that big question or topic that you're writing about can help things, I think, be more connected, but also kind of help like diversify like your characters' personalities and things like that. So something to think about, but great question. Any others? Yeah.
What's your favorite pond?
Favorite pond to fish at? I'd say locally, Molly's Pond around here is that's a pretty good spot for fishing. Like going there sometimes. Otherwise, my favorite spots are not really in Illinois. I also like going up to Wisconsin. I don't know if anyone's familiar with the Three Lakes Eagle River area, but like heading up to the Northwoods sometimes to fish. Otherwise, all my favorite spots are out west. So, any others? I'm not sure how we're doing on time. Yeah.
I like the ring.
Thank you. Comments are fine too. Yeah.
What inspired you to like just keep writing the answer?
Yeah, no, it's okay. So what inspired me just to keep writing? Again, I think I can just be kind of a stubborn and I'm a person who likes to persevere, but I got that practice through a lot of things. Like I said, I played a lot of sports growing up, so just kind of that like never giving up and persevering. I learned through sports in middle school and high school. I played volleyball all through high school and then ran track. I did sprints and then was a distance runner. So that kind of gave me some practice at persevering and not giving up, but I just believed in myself and this story so much that I refused to let it do. So, do we have time for any more?
I have one more question.
Okay, one more question. There's no one else over here. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, okay, so I'll answer this real quick too. So for information that a reader doesn't know, how do you present it in a way that the reader can understand? So even with a book all about fly fishing, it's showing the characters doing that like thing, but then also kind of explaining in the story some of that jargon too. So kind of that balance of like showing the action, but also explaining at the same time. Like if you read this, it'll make a lot more sense how I do that, but I think that's a good way to balance it too. So again, that's showing in your writing too. Okay. So thanks again for being a fun audience. I appreciate it. Yeah, well, you're all
email? Were you on the big email? Your aunt said something's might shift.
I would just feel bad.
Yeah. We got it set up for Lucy, don't we? Yep.
Wait, it's an artist again? We see our next.
Are you guys staying on? No, now it's set design. Set design.
Wait,
Yeah.
there's another Lucy?
The only Lucy that.
No, but like Lucy, like we already watched it.
She like, yeah, it just kind of like be my feedback, but also we want to make sure your channel stick with that, so one of my good friends.
But like Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds.
YouTube channel, Musky Music is one of my good friends, YouTube channel, so. Yeah, so check it out, and yeah, if you ever have more questions about like starting out, things like that.
Survey to
My teacher did it, but I want to sign up. How do I sign up?
what?
So nice to meet you.
Fucking Utah?
Do you want to? What do you have last hour?
Of course, yeah.
Right now?
Roll
Yeah.
history with who?
See ya.
So go tell Frank.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Wait, who did you just see?
So first thing is.
Were you just in here? Oh, go tell Fran you want to come out for Spark Week.
Thank you.
I did not say yes.
I don't really think you
Okay.
really advice.
Yes. Otherwise, there's an email.
There's.
All right. Should be good, Lucy, to
Even there's
reconnect.
things I write where I'm like,
Oh,
go read this like.
got it.
It's
I
crap or
just
whatever,
right
yeah,
now.
but it's a lot of what you write.
Oh.
It's
Your special pen.
Yeah.
Well, there's two different.
You gonna be in here, Bella? Hey. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, of course. Yeah. 100%. What's your name? Patricia.
Got it.
And then yeah, feel free to move all this stuff.
You're fine. Here, I'm just gonna set your stuff to the side, guys. I'm consistency.
Okay, so Patricia, I'm gonna give you a couple of.
I will stay
Mark, her fishing story, she'd be like, and that's a fishing story. And it's like AI. I'm like, here's the real fish. I remember when I took Jonathan fishing, like, got a little bluegill, and I didn't like, it was as big as my head. I was like, excuse me. It sounded like Mickey Mouse. You know, like,
We were so
are you able to get back on to the? Oh, screen share?
Who made it?
There you go. Great show though. It's not cool.
What show is it? That's cool. Yeah, it's like
I just see the hand.
yeah. That's good.
Technically it was.
Yeah.
Minnie, are you out there by chance? The mic, check
So
out.
I'd say read the books that you want to write, and also pay attention to like what
Good,
is
you
it
can
that
work on your stuff.
the lessons in the story, like how they're changing. So just it's also kind of like now being a student of the book too, and paying attention to like what you're liking in the stories.
Oh, go ahead and test the mic.
Hello.
Sounds good. Oh my gosh, I'd love to.
Just right, so maybe we'll have some people coming out. This is my theater team. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'm missing. Who am I missing?
I bet.
Yeah.
Do you tie your own?
Oh God, no, I don't have the patience.
Oh, I'll tell you a story about that.
Okay, okay.
You have there's a whole class coming in.
Okay.
So, Miss Matheson's class. Fun. This is your first time. Miss Matheson's class, sit wherever, try to, or if you guys want to all sit over here maybe, wherever.
Presenting, right?
Yeah.
Are you gonna just be in that area, or like, are you gonna move around?
I'll move around a little bit. Yeah.
Okay, just because I'm gonna be interpreting for my students here.
Okay. Yeah. I'll stay out of your way.
Yeah.
Hello. As you guys heard, my name is Lucy Green, and I am a theatrical designer, and I'm very excited and grateful to be here with you all today and share this field with you, because a lot of the time when I, oh, sorry, didn't realize I was clicking through. Excuse me. All right, we're back, sorry. A lot of the times when I tell people that I'm a scenic designer, they don't know what that means. And to be perfectly honest with you, a few years ago, I've been working in this field for 3.5 years now. I did not know what a scenic designer did either. So I'm really excited to share this with you guys. And I'm gonna start with kind of a big, grandiose question. Bear with me, I promise we won't stay in this land for the whole presentation. But I'm just genuinely really curious what you guys think. Why do you think we make art? And feel free to shout it out, raise your hand. Yeah, what do you think? Express yourself? Yeah, definitely. Anybody else? Sorry, what was that? Yes. I will share with you guys something that I've been thinking about a lot lately, about why I personally make art. And I'll share this quote by an author named Michael Chabon that I encountered my last year of college that really just changed the way that I think. And in the essay that I pulled this quote from, he's essentially saying that we are living in a broken world, as we all know. And he compares it to a jigsaw puzzle. If we picture all the pieces of this puzzle kind of just scattered about on the floor, and we're all just doing our best to pick up the pieces and put something together. But the thing is we don't have the box. We don't have that picture on the front of the box. We don't know what the final result is supposed to look like. We don't know what the image of the perfect world is supposed to be. So everything that we're doing is just picking up pieces and putting things together the best that we can. And I'm going to read this quote out loud to you guys. He says, "Some people, passing among the scattered pieces of that great overturned jigsaw puzzle, start to pick up a piece here, a piece there, with a vague yet irresistible notion that perhaps something might be done about putting the thing back together again. The most we can hope to accomplish with our handful of salvaged bits, the bittersweet harvest of observation and experience, is to build a little world of our own, a scale model of that mysterious original, unbroken, half-remembered. Of course, the worlds we build out of our store of fragments can be only approximations, partial and inaccurate. As representations of the vanished whole that haunts us, they must be accounted failures. And yet, in that very failure, in their gaps and inaccuracies, they may yet be faithful maps, accurate scale models of this beautiful and broken world. We call these scale models works of art." And the first time I encountered this quote, it really got me thinking that every single piece of art, whether it's a choreographed dance, a musical composition, a painting, a piece of theater, it all is essentially collage. We're all taking bits and pieces of what's around us and rearranging things, putting things together in a different way to create this image of what we think the world ought to be. And one thing I find very exciting about theater is that it's a very multidisciplinary, multifaceted way of doing that. You have all these different tools at your disposal to take these pieces of your collage and create something new. And thinking back to how I got into this, how I kind of discovered this field and what was going through my mind when I was a high schooler, when I was where you guys are now, I was actually really, really interested in biology, specifically evolutionary biology. When things got down to like a cellular level and chemistry got involved, I couldn't be bothered. But I'm thinking about why I was interested in this and how this applies to what I do now, and I realized that design is so fascinating. Evolutionary biology was so fascinating to me is because it's essentially design. It's all, like, we can see, if we look at a manatee's flipper and we see toenails that resemble an elephant's toenails, we're taking all these visual pieces and clues in our natural world and deducing stories about how it came to be, how all of these creatures are related, how they're all related to their environments, how they came to adapt to their environment. And if you think about any piece of media that you can become engrossed in, a video game, a novel, movie, theater, anything that involves world building, I personally think that the most fascinating thing about engaging in a piece of media like that is kind of thinking like an evolutionary biologist for that world and thinking about the history of that world and all of these things that came together to create the narrative of this fantasy world. And it's very powerful to be a designer and to be able to create these clues to share with your audience so that they can deduce the history of the worlds that you're presenting to them. I was also very into visual art when I was in high school. These are some of the paintings from when I was in high school. And I remember this feeling when I would complete a painting. I would have this image in my head, this three-dimensional space that I would be traversing in my mind, and then I would put it on paper, and I would put a frame around it, and I would think, there's something kind of unsatisfying about this. Like, that's it? It's just a painting? And I couldn't quite put my finger on why it just wasn't working for me. And so then I started to think, maybe I just gotta paint really big. So I started painting for my high school's theater department, and something clicked. And it wasn't just helpful that I was painting larger, even though that is really, really exciting. It was seeing the painting in context, seeing it behind performers telling a story, seeing it interact with changing lights, changing sounds, and become something greater than it is by itself that I found interesting. And here are some other pieces from a production my high school did of Spamalot. Is anybody here familiar with Spamalot or Monty Python at all? It's a very funny play. That image on the left there, there's a moment in the play where the feet of God fly in. And so this was my little joke. I decided that God was wearing Crocs. And that was just a little something that I was able to add to the story that wasn't in the script. So there's just certain things that as a designer you can contribute to a story that wouldn't otherwise be there. It's not something that you can get just from reading. So I'm going to now talk about this big fancy term that is scenography. And the formal definition of scenography is that it includes all of the elements that contribute to establishing an atmosphere and mood for a theatrical presentation: lighting, sound, set, and costume design. And I'll actually expand this definition to also include puppetry design. I work secondarily as a puppetry designer. And we can even expand it to include movement design or choreography. Basically, all of these pieces that contribute to the world of a play. And when I was in high school, in addition to visual art and biology, I was also very interested in music. I'm actually still working as a musician. It's very helpful when going through a scenic design process. But I want to share this quote with you guys from an artist named Jean-Michel Basquiat, which is that art is how we decorate space, and music is how we decorate time. And I think that theater is how we decorate space over time. And scenic design is kind of, I think, like a musical approach to visual art. And what I mean by that is you are taking visuals and you're putting them in the context of time. You have to think about how your audience is experiencing these things that they're seeing over a fixed period, over a fixed narrative. And you have to think like a composer. You have to think about pacing, about beats, about how to make moments land. And I'll share an example that kind of speaks to what I mean by that. And this was for a play called In the Next Room. It was in a black box theater, smaller than this one here, 8-foot-high ceilings. And the entire play takes place in a Victorian era living room until the final scene, which it's written in the script, that everything is supposed to disappear and we are supposed to enter into a winter garden. So there was no capacity for this production for anything to come up from the ground dramatically or fly in, or even come on and off stage carried on by actors. None of that kind of magic was available to us. So what I ended up doing was covering the entire theater in invisible blacklight paint, so all over the floor, even climbing up and down the audience risers. So in this moment, and it was coalesced with kind of a brilliant sound design, the black lights would turn on and the space was instantly transformed and the audience would gasp. It was just such a magical moment. And we spent so much time curating that moment and the pacing along with the acting and the line delivery just to make sure that it landed the way that it should. And so that's what I mean by thinking musically as a theatrical designer. You have to think about how to time these moments in order to resonate with the audience how you mean them to. So I'm going to go into now what the process of scenic design actually entails. What does a scenic designer actually do to create these worlds? And I'll start by going through this production of a play called Pity, which I have the model of over here if anyone's interested in taking a closer look later. But this is a play that I first encountered in my playwriting class when I was in college. I remember reading it, and in this play, every single building explodes. There is a flood, there is an earthquake, there is a tornado. It's wild, and I remember reading it and thinking, oh God, that'd be a tough one to design. Couldn't be me. And then a couple years later, the professor of that class actually called me up and said, hey, remember that play that you really liked when we read it? Do you want to design it? And I was like, absolutely, and I'm so glad that I did. But this play wasn't only difficult because of all of these crazy moments that we had to dramatize. It was also difficult because it had a tone that was very complicated and took a lot of work to place. Is anybody here familiar with this term that is absurdism? Does anyone know what I mean by that? And it's okay, I'm still figuring out exactly what it means, but it's a style of theater and also a style of writing that is kind of what it sounds like. It's absurd, and this play definitely falls into that. It's all these crazy things happening, but another quality of absurdism is the way that people react to things. There's this strange nonchalance that people in these stories usually have. You can see here, like, this person's getting struck by lightning, and the guy standing in front is just continuing to eat his ice cream cone. So it's just a strange dissonance that comes with these types of plays that are often very funny, but it's a difficult tone to work with. And we did this play in 2024, and it's a play where there's a lot of carpet bombing happening, a lot of terrible things happening that echoed what we are seeing in the news. So I was thinking, how are we going to take this, and why would we put this into a play and make it funny? How is that right? So that led me to the next step in the process, which for me is journaling, spending a lot of time thinking through a play, thinking about what does this mean to me? What is my personal end to this story? It's your responsibility as a designer, as an artist, to care about what you're working on, to find a way to make sure that it resonates with you. Because if you don't feel connected to the material, how can you expect your audience to? So I spend a lot of time at the beginning of the process figuring out what something means to me. And that's one of the exercises that I do in addition to that is something I call a planetary exercise, which is a little writing prompt where it's think about this play as if it were a planet. What is the atmosphere of this planet? What kind of weather is there? How does the lighting behave on this planet? How do people behave? What are the social structures? Are there caste systems? It's a way to get your imagination rolling and start to think abstractly about a play. And another thing that I do is I do sketching that is not scenic design sketching. I'm thinking about images that the play is evoking for me that I don't necessarily apply to the scenic design, but it feels more just like a graphic representation. And it just is a way to help me land on tone and start to think about what does this play feel like to me? And that primes me for the next step of the process, which is research. And a lot of the times, depending on the play, you have to do a lot of historical research just to ground yourself in the period of the play. This was not necessarily that type of play, so I leaned into what I call emotional research, which is looking at different pieces of art and different images that evoke the same feeling for me that the play has. And then it becomes a game of figuring out what is it that connects these images? What is it about them that makes them feel how the play feels to me? And for this play, I ended up happening upon a lot of artwork by Terry Gilliam, which I'm not sure if anyone here is familiar with Terry Gilliam, but he did all of the animations for the Monty Python films. And he has a very distinct style where he takes these old-timey Victorian images and collages them into humorous environments. And there's something about that animation that also felt pertinent to this play that comes in later. And there's also some images here that felt kind of humorous, nonchalant, disconnected in a way that the tone of the play felt to me. One of those images is from a Wes Anderson film, and one of them is from a neighborhood in Amsterdam. And so the next step in the process, after you've done your journaling, after you've done your research, is to start to actually sketch the thing. And for this play, it was very important to think early on about how things move. And I ended up making this little paper theater puppet thing just to start to work through some ideas. And I made a bunch of little videos like this to share with the director just to get conversations going, and also to start to think about composition. And you'll see that a lot of what you're seeing in this image here makes it into the final design. And from there, we go into a sketch model. This is a 1/4-inch scale model. This image here is an 1/8-inch scale model. So very tiny, not meant to be accurate, just meant to start getting these images into 3-dimensional space and to start testing out ideas. And then we start to get a little bit more refined. This is a rendering that I did in Photoshop and Procreate, and it's taking a lot of what was working from the previous iterations and developing them into this color rendering. And then you always have to think about your design in context with people. You always have to include an image of people for scale, because one thing about this design that I think ended up being really effective was the way that it kind of makes these people feel out of scale with their world. That's a really powerful thing that you can do as a designer. If you think about an opera, a lot of the time if there's a staircase in an opera, the steps will be 6 inches high so that someone can walk down them gracefully so that their diaphragm isn't disturbed and they can keep singing. If you think about like a Pee Wee Herman set, for instance, I'm not sure if that means anything to you guys, but his stairs, the steps were all super tall, so he would look really ridiculous and childlike going up them. So one thing that we wanted to mess with this set were these giant clamshell footlights down below. This proscenium, or this frame around everything that came down pretty low, kind of dwarfed these people on stage, just starting to make these people feel unreal in this world. And then we move on to the next phase of the design process. All of the materials that you've seen previously are really useful to show directors, costume designers, lighting designers, everyone on your team. But then you have to be able to communicate your design to the people who are building it. And this is basically, if you think about like an architect making blueprints, these are technical drawings that you share with the technical director, with the carpenters, so that they can build your play as accurately as possible. And I'm not gonna lie, this is not my favorite part of the process. No matter what you guys go into, there's going to be something about it that you do not enjoy. If you're somebody who likes to sit on a computer and problem solve frustrating mathy things all day long, you might really enjoy drafting. I do not, but that's okay. Can't have everything. And then we move on to one of my favorite parts of the design process, which is modeling. And the model is a really useful tool to share with a director because they're able to take these little scale people that you see here and move them around and start to imagine blocking out this show and start to imagine people moving through this world that you created so that they can start to think about how to build scenes. And then we move into actually fabricating this thing. And the designer takes on a different role in the fabrication process depending on the scope of the project. There have been shows where I've built the entire thing myself. There have been shows where someone else builds everything and I just end up coming in to paint. That's usually what happens. The designer usually does a little bit of painting and has carpenters responsible for building. But came in and started to paint out this show, and that's when things start to get really exciting, when you see things come together. And here are some more painting process images from this show. There were a lot of moving pieces that came in. This cloud guy is my favorite. There's a part where someone is on stage and they say, "Oh, it's raining," and these rain clouds come in, and it's very funny. And then this is the absolute most gratifying part of scenic design. This is when you start to see everything come together. The lighting design, the sound design, the actors, the costumes start to inhabit this world that you created, and everything transforms. And here's another production photo from this show, and this is towards the end. This is after things have been destroyed. This is after the flood happened. You can see there's some balloons on the ground. We had a giant balloon drop at one point to represent the bombings, and balloons were filled with confetti and popped, and it was very humorous, but then there were moments where it became really upsetting. And you can see here things starting to feel, still feeling humorous, but getting a little bit darker, but then nothing's really changed except how the actors are selling things. You can see how differently this feels, how differently the balloons feel. They don't feel playful anymore, they feel sinister. And so it's so powerful to see how images that you put on stage can be transformed by the way people are behaving around it. And also, sometimes when shows are done, you get to keep certain pieces. That image on the right there with the sun, that was something the director sent me. And fun fact about me, this image over here, that's what I wake up to every morning. I have no idea what to do with these guys.
Somebody get to keep the puppy?
The puppy? Oh, that's the director's, yeah. Yeah, that's Phoebe. But if anyone wants a cloud, let me know. I don't know what to do with them. But yeah, so just to reiterate, going through the process, first step, journaling, find your personal in, do your research. And then move on to sketching. And I like to often start with black and white gestural sketches like this, really just laying out the architecture of what I'm imagining this world to be, thinking about people moving through it, creating dramatic images. And more or less, they often end up pretty close to the final product. And it's the first thing that I show a director, and it just gets conversation going. We find out what they're responding to, what they're more hesitant about, and then you just get more and more information about how they're visualizing the play, and then you can share images or information about how you're visualizing the play, and it just gets everybody on the same page. Here's an example of a production of Henry V that we set in a summer camp, and you can see the progression here, top corner image, that's the initial black and white charcoal sketch moving into a color rendering, and then we move into the final production images, and you can see that some things stay the same throughout, some things change, some things develop, and some things change because as you're going through the process, you're taking in feedback from your collaborators, you're taking in ideas, and it's really exciting to be in a room with people and everyone's talking about something, getting excited about things, and ideas are coming back and forth, and that's how you arrive at certain details. Then we go into drafting. That's the next step of the process. And after drafting is modeling, which is one of my favorite parts because you get to make cute little tiny things, like that cute little jukebox there. These are some models that I make for a designer who I assist. That's one thing as a scenic designer that you can do to make a little bit of extra money and also learn a lot, is assist other designers, which basically means you do their drafting and modeling for them. And then we move on to the fabrication and the painting. And these are all images from a production of Hairspray I designed. And I still think that whoopee cushion might be one of the best things I ever painted. which is kind of unfortunate, but. And then you get to see everything come together in context, and it's all just so exciting. And then you get to see everything come together with people and see how that world transforms when people move around in it. And another thing that I do in addition to just straight up scenic design is I work as a scenic painter as well. And that's a way to also make a living. And something that's exciting about that is you never know what you're going to be asked to make next. So you might be asked to make SpongeBob's house, which so much fun. You might be asked to make this old English coin, but you get to just create faux materials as well. You can turn anything into anything with just paint, and it's really, really exciting. And you can take the skills that you have as a designer, as a fabricator, and apply them to non-theatrical projects. This was for a social club downtown called the Soho House. They hired me to make an entryway display for their New Year's party, which was fairy garden themed. So I hunkered down in my aunt's basement with a can of spray foam, and I made a tree, and I made some paintings, and then we got them loaded up in the car and brought them over to the space and zip tied them to the shelves and lit them up. And you can create something that's really effective with just basic everyday materials. And some more images. You just never know what you're going to be asked to create. And it's always just so much fun. For instance, I was hired to create all of these fake pies for a production of Waitress once. And when I was hired, I was like, I don't know how to make a fake pie. But that's the thing about working in theater is you are going to be asked to do things that you don't know how to do. You're like, how would a person do that to begin with? But you figure it out. You do some Googling, you do some trial and error, and you do some problem solving, and you can surprise yourself and have the most fun that you've ever had. This was the best week of my life. So it's also, I just wanted to show some of these images to show more darker, I would call these more lyrical designs as well, just to show that you can be very versatile in this art form. You could be very playful, you can be very somber, you could be very intense. And that's another thing, it just really stretches you to explore all different aspects of yourself as an artist. So I wanted to bring us back to this question of why do we make art? And I have this image on the slide here for a reason. This is a painting that I did for a mentor of mine who's a lighting designer. And this was a moment from a production of Cabaret that he was particularly proud of. So I painted it for him. And I gave it to him as a gift. So, and thinking about why we make art, yes, we're picking up pieces of the world. We're putting things together. We're figuring things out. We're being curious. But then we're giving that to somebody. We're giving gifts to the world by making pieces of art. And I wanted to end with this production of The Little Mermaid, just because it opens next week. I got back from Iowa from working on this yesterday, and I'm going back basically tomorrow. And this is a rendering of that. And here is a process image I took this weekend after painting the floor. And here is a puppetry design I did for it, and a video that the fabricator sent. And when I opened this email, I was so excited. And it felt like receiving a gift. And it just felt like so much joy. Like, I feel joy from seeing this. I'm sure this guy's name's Joe also felt joy making it. And I imagine that the kids who come see it are going to feel joy from it as well. So that's where I think the most meaningful part of making any piece of art is you're sharing your joy with somebody, or you're sharing your sorrow, but most importantly, you're sharing. And whether or not you guys go into theater or scenic design or anything artistic, you all are deeply creative people, and it is not only your right, but it is your responsibility to go forward in this world and be creative and share and be generous and give gifts. Thank you all so, so much. I'm happy to take any questions if anybody has any right now. Yeah. Yeah, that one is in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. It opens April 10th, so a week from Friday. Yeah. It's really fun. I'm so excited. Yeah. Coming up with the idea itself, it really depends because sometimes you know right away. You read a play and you're like, I know what this looks like. And then you show it to a director and they're like, yes, you're right. Sometimes it takes months of trying stuff, showing it to your team, and just things not working, but maybe a little piece of it does, so then you take that and you move forward to the next iteration. So it could take anywhere from 10 seconds to months. But the overall design process, that again varies. The humane timeline is usually 6 months to be able to create a design, draft it out, model it out. But sometimes you're not given that luxury and you kind of have to hunker down and complete something in 3 weeks. Yeah. Yeah.
How long before opening day do you start painting the floors, everything? When do you the first person that gets to start before everything?
That also depends. Usually the painters are the last to come in, and we kind of get the short end of the stick because you have to balance out people rehearsing, so you can't really be in the space painting. So that floor for Little Mermaid I did overnight, and it was, yeah, it's... Oh, that would be nice. That would be nice. That's not usually how it plays out. The thing about scenic painting is that it's a very different type of painting than if you're doing an oil painting. You have to learn how to work very quickly, and it's just a different type of thinking. And yeah, so usually there's a 1 to 2 week period where painters come in and complete everything. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you also have to decide on the material that is used to create everything? So flounder, was that flounder?
That was just a puffer fish.
Pufferfish, did you decide it was going to be like a lantern, or did somebody else make that?
That was something I did decide that it was going to be a lantern because we knew we wanted to have a light in it so that it can glow. And the idea was I was thinking about a paper lantern that was inherently collapsible. But a lot of the time for scenery, you present to your team what you want something to look like, and everyone works together to think about the best materials to get the job done. And also thinking about budget, like what can we manage with this? And sometimes it's we've got to make the walls out of cardboard. Sometimes it's we are building out walls out of lumber as if we were building an actual house. But sometimes if you want something to look a particular way or work a particular way as a designer, you have to be very specific about that. Yeah. I play clarinet. Are you a musician?
I am.
What do you play?
I play tuba.
Oh, nice. Nice. Can I scat? Like, do you want to?
Come on.
I'm just kidding. No, I am not a vocalist, so no, I cannot. Yeah. I've been playing, oh boy, since I was 11, so 14 years now. Yeah.
How long have you been painting? Because those paintings, even like the ones you did in high school, that's impressive.
Thank you so much. I mean, I think like most kids, I started off drawing. I started painting, I think, when I was in like 5th or 6th grade, so 10, 11, probably. But colored pencil drawing, the things that we learn as kids, like those, the learning that you do there applies to any medium as you move forward. So that type of learning happened earlier.
I think that's all we got.
All right, thank you all so much.
grabbed a shirt, right?
Yes.
Okay. Awesome. I know. We've got till 35 for the next one if they want to ask you any questions or anything.
The clouds? I drew them on my iPad. That took like 30 seconds and I kept...
Hey, what's going on, Don? I'm good. Here you
Yeah.
go. Oh,
Okay.
where's your computer?
Here, around.
Cool.
All right, I'll move back in. Okay.
So I got all the things and
Thank you. Round two.
Round 2.
Homework, do you know how much time you gave us?
All right, so we're on day 2. We're ending day 2 of Spark Week. Raise your hand if you've been to anything so far for Spark Week. You've seen some stuff. Amazing. You've still got 2 more days after this, so hopefully you're going back to see something else. With us this hour is Connie Richardson. She's the debut author of Rapid City Summer. She's going to hold it up and present it to you all. She teaches middle school English in Lake Zurich. And when she's not teaching or writing, she enjoys fly fishing out west, which she's going to talk about, running, coaching cross country, and cooking for her family and friends. Enjoy, and like I just warned you, she's a teacher. She knows about all these tricks. And I didn't say this, but put your phones away. Give the respect to
Phones,
the person.
AirPods, all the things.
Sean,
I actually been to that one before.
sweet. Enjoy it again.
Okay.
Great,
Cool.
that too. Awesome.
I said what you said.
But you know all the answers.
Yeah,
you
don't
can't,
give
you can't be getting all the answers for free candy, Sean.
But just
Okay.
for just coming back for round 2.
Okay.
Enjoy.
Okay.
Okay. Well, you gotta answer questions first. So yes, I'm a teacher. I am gonna ask questions. I do want you to participate, so this won't just be me like talking at you. Well, like, there's times for you guys to talk too. So look alive, pay attention. So happy Spark Week. Thank you so much for having me. This week, what a great opportunity for you all. Like Mr. New said, I am also a teacher, and my middle school at Lake Zurich, we also do a Writers Week. So I know this is a fun opportunity to learn some different things, have different opportunities. Let's be real, get out of class, all of the things. So I'm glad you guys are here. So a little bit more about me. Like I said, I'm an English teacher. I'm also a writing mentor, so I also help other people who want to write books, bring their stories to life, kind of guide them through the writing process, answer questions about publication and all of those things. I coach cross country at my school. I'm a runner myself. I ran at UW-Platteville, so I ran P3 when I was in college, and obviously I'm an author. So I got married last July as well. When that time comes for all of you, I highly, highly recommend getting out of Illinois and going somewhere cool. So we got married in Big Sky, Montana. Love the mountains. And then that picture above is me fly fishing, which we're going to talk a lot about fly fishing. Does anyone know what fly fishing is, or you've heard of it, or you're kind of familiar? Has anyone tried fly fishing in here? A couple of you. All right, so not as many hands. So I'll make sure you kind of get the lay of the land as we move through as well. But then went to Canada last summer for our honeymoon. Went up to Banff National Park in Calgary. Has anyone been to Canada in here? A couple people? Cool. So yeah, beautiful area. Love the mountains and the water. That's definitely my jam. So highly recommend traveling somewhere cool when you get married. My first novel, Rapid City Summer, came out last May through Black Rose Writing, so available anywhere books are sold. So I'll tell you guys a little bit more about my book as we go through. I'm currently writing my next novel, which is a young adult dystopian sports book. So if you like the Hunger Games, Uglies, kind of those types of stories, we're all my athletes in here. We're my sports people. Athletes, cool. Okay, so if you like sports, you'd like this book as well. I enjoy fly fishing. Like I said, well, I'll kind of explain what that is too as we go through. Ice fishing, I'm weird. I like the cold, so ice fishing's fun. And then muskie fishing. Does anyone know what muskies are in here? Been muskie fishing? A handful of you? Okay, so they're like a really big fish. If you don't know what they are, they have a lot of teeth. They can be kind of scary. They're really tough to catch. And my biggest muskie, for reference, if you don't know like what they are, is just under 40 inches. So they're pretty big fish. Your first chance at some Nerds Gummy Clusters. Who can guess my favorite musical artist? There's a reason. I am a Swiftie, that's correct.
Dude!
No more sharing answers then. No more. I'm not calling on you anymore. So yes, I am a Swiftie. Sorry if you are not, but there's a reason why. We're coming back to that later. Okay. A little bit about me as a reader and as a writer. So, thank you. So I like to write stories that have teen characters. I'm a middle school teacher. Just kind of my high school years had their ups and downs, as I'm sure all of yours do too. So it's just a time that I've written about in Rapid City Summer, and even kind of in the book I'm working on now. So stories with teen characters, books with sports. Like I said, there's fly fishing. I consider fishing a type of sport. I've coached cross country. I run. I played volleyball in high school. I've played tennis, softball. I danced. I just like sports and staying active in general. So a lot of that influences my writing. Books with interesting family dynamics. My parents got divorced when I was 10 years old. My grandma lived with us most of my life, so just family dynamics and family drama kind of interest me, and I like to incorporate that into my writing. Books where the reader will learn something new, so obviously fly fishing in this book and some other elements in the next book I'm working on, and books that leave readers inspired and hopeful. How many of you have trouble finding books that you would enjoy or find interesting? Raise your hand. Right, I definitely did when I was in middle school and high school. Like, it can be tough to find good books. Right, so these were a handful of the books that I enjoyed when I was your age and I was in high school. So the Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants series, really enjoyed those. So it's about these 4 friends who this pair of jeans magically fits all of them, and then they all travel one summer, and then they kind of send these jeans around. It sounds really weird, but it's a great story. All of these books are also movies too. The Twilight series I enjoyed. I was Team Jacob. And then the Hunger Games series, those were coming out when I was in high school as well. And then over here on the right, when I was younger, always loved reading and writing, loved going to the library, doing summer reading programs. But in elementary school, we had a program called Young Authors, where you were just given like a blank hardcover book, and then you got to illustrate it, write a story, make your cover, all of the things. Did any of you get to do this in elementary school too? Yeah. Young Authors, cool. Okay, so here are some of my books that I wrote, starting in, I think, kindergarten or first grade. The Puppy, that beautiful illustration of a dog. Then we have Practice and Your Dreams Will Come True. Maybe that was like 5th grade, I think. And then in 4th grade, I wrote Mission Time Out in Alaska, a Beanie Babies story. So you all have your Neatos and your fidgets and all the things. That's what you collect. For us, it was Beanie Babies. We loved Beanie Babies. We collected them. We would trade them. So that was the focus of that book. So before I move on, and those of you who have been here before, don't just shout out the answers. What do we think my 3 young authors books, The Puppy, Practice and Your Dreams Will Come True, which is a tennis book. I played tennis a lot growing up too. And then my Beanie Baby book. What do we think all 3 of those books might have in common? Any guesses what those 3 seemingly very different books, what they all might have in common? Love all the hands. What do you think? Those were things, yes, those were things I was very interested in at those times. So here you go. Enjoy. All right. Yes, those are all things I was very interested in. And that kind of ties to how I wrote Rapid City Summer and my inspiration for that book. So what inspired Rapid City Summer? It was things that I was interested in, things I was passionate about, maybe even you could say obsessed. And that's my advice to you, anyone who wants to write a book or create something or pursue a creative endeavor. Write or create what you know, things that you are interested in, and topics that you are just really passionate and kind of obsessed with, right? So when I wanted to write Rapid City Summer, I started the process of writing this book in 2021, so almost 5 years ago now. I wanted to write a book that had things that I just couldn't find in books for teens. Again, I'm a middle school teacher. My students are asking me for book recommendations, and I'm trying to find things that they're looking for, but there were some things that they were asking for that I couldn't find, so that was also part of my mission of writing Rapid City Summer and just things I was interested in too. So I wanted to write a book that was set in western states. You don't see a lot of books that are set in South Dakota or Montana, so that's where Rapid City Summer set. So I wanted to focus on that for the setting. I wanted examples of strong friendships. I know high school can be a tough time for navigating friendships, the dynamics and the drama, the highs and lows, all of it. So I wanted to include just good examples of friendships, but also how to navigate some of those difficult conversations or falling out and those sorts of things. So just examples of strong friendships and stories, and of fly fishing. So again, that's a passion of mine. I've been fly fishing for about a decade now, for about 10 years. And that was just something I haven't really seen in fiction books, whether for young adults, whether for adults in general. So I just wanted to include that topic in this book as well. So I want you to just think about writing what you know and things that you are just obsessed with and really passionate about. And before we go much further, I want to tell you a little bit more about what Rapid City Summer is about, just to kind of give you that context too, in case this is a book you might be interested in reading. So it's about a 15-year-old girl whose name is Natalie. Do I have any freshmen, sophomore, who are my underclassmen in here? Anyone? Underclassmen? A few of you guys? Okay. So underclassmen characters, 15, 16-year-old characters. So Natalie grew up in the Chicago suburbs right after her freshman year when she's kind of settled and forming her friends and getting her footing in high school. Her mom gets a new job and they have to move across the country to Rapid City, South Dakota. So as you can imagine, she's not super happy about that, leaving her friends, leaving her team, leaving just everything she's been comfortable with her entire life, and having to move across the country to somewhere very, very different than here. Along with that, they end up moving 10 minutes away from her grandma, who she does not have a relationship with, and you find out why in the book. So then it's kind of her navigating, like getting to know her grandma, finding out why her family doesn't have this relationship with her grandma. And then Natalie also becomes friends with her next door neighbor, Adam. So there's a little bit of like, will they be more than friends? Will they just stay friends kind of situation between them? And then ultimately, in South Dakota, you wouldn't maybe guess it, but the fishing is really good out west in the western part of South Dakota. So she learns how to fly fish, and that's kind of how she gets more comfortable with her surroundings. So there's a little bit of that. As we go through, because we are going to talk more about fishing in this presentation, for those who don't know what fly fishing is, I'm just going to give you a little background, just so as we're talking about things, makes a little more sense what I'm trying to explain. So if you don't know what fly fishing is, first, how many of you have just gone regular fishing with like a worm, the bobber, like going to the pond, whatever, perfect, right? So we're familiar with that. Fly fishing is different because it's a style of fishing where the bait mimics the bugs and the aquatic insects that the fish actually eat. So you're not throwing like live worms. They're all kind of artificial baits, but they're not like plastics or things that don't look natural. So I have kind of my examples of flies here. So in this box are things that look like actual bugs that the fish eat. That's the main difference in fly fishing compared to other types of fishing. The rod and reel also look different, but the main thing is you're trying to mimic as natural a presentation as possible for the fish. When you're fly fishing, you're mainly going after trout. That's kind of the main species that you're targeting, but you can catch bass, bluegill, perch, kind of all sorts of different fish, but trout is the main species that you catch. So I'll show you guys a short video kind of what this looks like in action.
Nuts. So I'm on this beautiful river, and there are a ton of caddis just bouncing up and down on top of the water. And I know the fish are eating them because I can see them coming up and just smacking caddis right off the water surface. So I'm gonna tie on a caddis dry fly, just a single dry fly, because I want my presentation to be absolutely perfect. We're gonna chuck it up there and see if we can get a fish.
Style of fishing called dry fly fishing, where the fish are going to eat off the surface and there's little bugs on top of the water. So that's kind of more of these like fuzzy looking flies in the side of the fly box. So they'll just come up and eat right off the surface. Yeah, these are my actual like flies that I fly fish with. Yeah, so these are real. I'm going to show you guys one of them in a little bit to go with a story that I'm about to tell. But then this is also so then this type of trout too that he caught is called a cutthroat. So they're in more like elevated types of waters and elevated places. But if you look closely, you can see right under its jaw kind of looks like an orange marking there, like it's got a cut in its throat. So that's why that's called a cutthroat trout. Okay. All right, so here's a picture of the biggest brown trout. So this is a brown trout that I caught on a fly fishing rod. I've caught a brown trout a little bit bigger than that ice fishing. So I'm gonna let you guys in on a little secret because I'm also local to here. I live in Grace Lake, but just over the border, when the harbors of Lake Michigan and Racine and Kenosha, when they freeze up, you can catch really big trout through the ice of those harbors off of Lake Michigan. So I've caught a brown trout a little bit bigger than that ice fishing. But are there any guesses how big this brown trout is that I caught in this picture? guesses on how big this fish is? Any guesses? Yeah.
42.
Not 42. Good. So it's smaller than that. Smaller than that. Yeah. Sorry. What was yours? 20. What was yours? Okay. 24. Good job. Yeah. So 2 feet. So 24 inches. So I'm going to tell you how I caught this fish, and it required these 4 different elements of perseverance, trying new strategies, asking for help, and showing up, and kind of how those all played into the role of catching this fish. So a few years ago, my husband and I, he's also a teacher, so we spend our summers, we take about 2 or 3 weeks of our summer, hit the road, go fishing in all of the places. So this year we ended up going, this particular year, we went to Utah and fishing the Green River. That river is particularly known for having really good dry fly fishing, like you saw in that video, where fish are just coming up and eating off the surface all the time. However, the year we went, that was not the case. This year that we went, it was kind of the middle of June. It was very cold. It was maybe like 45 degrees on this particular day, so not ideal summer weather. And also the river was very flooded that we wanted to fish. So the water was higher, the fish were behaving differently, and that really impacted then how we were going to fish. We had about 3 or 4 days in Utah, so our first day there, got skunked, didn't catch a thing. That was super frustrating. So then went back to the river the next day, and we showed up to try again. Kind of hopes were a little bit lower. We weren't sure if we were going to get into anything, so that's when we had to start trying some different strategies and asking for help. We went to the fly shop where you get kind of all of these flies and baits, and we're asking the people at the fly shop, we're like, hey, what should we try to catch these fish? Because dry flies aren't working, some of the other baits we have aren't working. So then the guy at the fly shop says, try this tiny little bait that you can probably barely see as I'm walking around. He's like, tie that onto your line, let it sit maybe 18 to 24 inches, like, a 1.5 to 2 feet below the water, and see if that works. That's been catching fish for some people, just something this tiny. And I'm sure as you're thinking, like, that's ridiculous, how would something this small catch that? But sure, we're out of ideas at this point, like, we'll try anything. So we picked up a few of these baits and got back on the river. Okay, so we're casting, still nothing. Trying different spots, we're trying different areas of the river. And then finally, I'm just trying to think outside the box and try different ideas. So if you look at the picture behind me, over, like if you're looking over my left shoulder, you're gonna see that big boulder. So I said, I'm gonna climb up on this boulder with my fishing rod, and I'm gonna start casting just so I can see the river better. Sometimes you can see shadows of fish and just see things, easier casting, whatever. So I set my rod down on this boulder, but also my line is kind of out in the water too, including the bait that's in the water while I'm climbing onto this boulder, with that tiny little bait at the end of it hanging in the water. Once I climb on top of this boulder, I go to grab my rod, and all of a sudden I lift it, and then the end is snagged on something. And then I'm really frustrated, because I'm snagged on a rock, I could be snagged on this greenery, now I can't fish after climbing all the way up here. Now I have to try and get this snag out, whatever this is. So I'm yanking, and then my snag starts moving. And at the end of that line was that fish. So all this time I've been yanking, I was just setting the hook into this brown trout that was hiding right under this rock and ate this little bait that was just kind of hanging out in the water while I was climbing on top of that rock. So I was like, all right, game on, we've got a fish, let's go. So I'm fighting it in. My husband got the net, and we netted that fish, and that was one of only 3 fish we caught over those handful of days in Utah. That was by far the biggest. The others were super small, but just after all of that, that was definitely the highlight of the trip and worth kind of all of the headache and frustration that we went through. But if we didn't persevere, if we didn't try different strategies, if we didn't ask for help, if we didn't just show back up to the river, this fish never would have been caught and wouldn't have that great memory. But for those of you who want to write a book or just in the process of writing a book in general, these same skills and components are required, that you need to persevere, you need to try different strategies, you need to ask for help at times, and then you need to just keep showing up to the page, to your computer, wherever you are writing. Okay? So as we think about my first draft of Rapid City Summer, so my first time just writing the actual story of this book, not what was published, but just the actual first draft, got a couple of questions for you. So first, how long did it take me to write the first draft, to just get the story out? So that's my first question for you. Yeah, what's your guess? 2 years? Not 2 years, wait, a lot less than 2 years, I'll tell you that. A lot less than 2 years, yes. More than a week. I wish it was that fast. I can't write that fast, but it was more than a week, yeah.
2 to 4 months.
It was actually 4.5 months. Nice job. So 4.5 months to write this first draft. My second question, how many words was that first draft? So if it took me 4.5 months to write this first draft, how many words did I get out in this first draft, this iteration of the story? What's your guess?
2,568.
That's a very good guess. Way more than 2,000 words. That's a lot more than 2,000 words to write a book. What's your guess?
365,000.
Not 365,000. That would be like really, really long books. I'd say are 150,000 words. So just to kind of give you that context. So more than 2,000, less than 365,000. What's your guess? 58,000. That's what it is. 58,000 words was that first draft. My final draft. So this published version, just so you can kind of see as we talk about revision 2, the final version. Guys, are we good over there? Okay. The final version is 71,000 words. So that just kind of shows too. We'll talk about that as we go through revision, but it started out at about 58,000 words. Okay. So in that process of writing this first draft of Rapid City Summer, here are some similarities between catching a big fish or just fishing and then writing a book in general. Both require perseverance. So in fishing, you're not going to catch your biggest fish the first time you go out fishing unless you just get super duper lucky. But like 99.99% of the time, that's not the case. You're not going to catch fish some days. You're not going to catch big fish or a lot of fish some days. But that doesn't mean you just give up and like toss all your fishing equipment and like give up, right? So you have to keep persevering and keep trying. Same thing goes for writing. I know you've all written essays before, maybe short stories and creative writing, like you've all written things before. Generally, you're not going to write your best version of something after your first attempt at it, right? So whether it's an article, an essay, a poem, your first go at writing is often not your best attempt at it. The first draft of a book, especially, is really you telling yourself the story. And it's writing that you're not really going to show anybody or ask other people to read. That's just more for you to kind of figure out what's the story and what are you trying to explain and convey to people. But even though writing can be really difficult and frustrating, or like what you have in your brain isn't matching what's on the page, that doesn't mean you give up. You need to keep going and keep trying, even when it feels forced, awkward, and doesn't make any sense. And in those moments, that's when it's important to try new strategies. So again, in fishing, that looks like changing out your bait. What's the color of the bait? What's the depth at which you're fishing? With what part of the river or the lake or wherever that you're on? What time of day are you going out in the morning, afternoon, evening? Again, location we talked about. All of those different things you got to try to be successful. Same in writing. So sometimes you have to think about, do I have enough dialogue? Are the characters talking to each other enough? Do you have what's called interiority? So kind of knowing what the characters are thinking and feeling in the story. More action. Are characters actually doing things, or are you just like talking about them doing things? Like showing the actual action in the story and different points of view. So picking a different character to get their perspective, first versus third, all of those things. Even how you write can make an impact in telling your story, right? So I have this notebook here, and in this notebook is actually my next book that I'm working on right now. So I'm actually handwriting my book, which sounds kind of crazy when you think about it, but there's a reason why I'm doing that. So when I wrote Rapid City Summer, I typed the entire book, but the trick is you can't go back and edit when you're working on a first draft. That's the trick. Those of you who are writing or want to write something and you're like, I've tried, but I just can't finish the story, or I keep getting stuck, like you can't edit or revise or change things until you get that first version of the book done. So like here, I've got, here's a page from like my current novel that I'm working on, but what's nice about a notebook is there's no backspace, there's no delete, you just have to keep writing forward. So I have things crossed off, I have things scribbled off, I write on one side, and then on the other side I kind of put the notes of things that I know I want to go back and change, parts I want to cut, parts I know I have to add, details I have have to fix, and then you just keep writing forward. You just kind of brain dump the things that you know aren't working on one side, and you keep getting the story out on the other, and that's been helping a lot. So sometimes it's just trying a different strategy of actually like getting the story onto the page. Sometimes it's the time of day that you write, morning, afternoon, evening, figuring that out. A lot of times I'll write in the evening after work. In the summers or when I have time off, morning works really well for me, but my school, how early do you guys start school, by the way? I'm curious. 8:15, okay, my school starts at 7:20, it's so early, so I wish I could be like a morning person and get up before work and write, but that's not happening during the school year, so I have to write in the evening, but sometimes you gotta be flexible, right? So thinking about the time of day that you're working, and also the types of goals that you're setting. So those of you, whatever you do, if you're an athlete, if you're a musician, if you're a writer, whatever you are, sometimes if you have a goal you're working toward and you're stuck, like I can't like take this next step toward my goal, or I'm kind of hitting a roadblock, think about the types of goals you're setting and maybe change how you're goal setting, right? So even in writing, you might have a word count goal. I'm gonna write 100 words today. Or minute goal. I'm gonna write for 30 minutes today. Or pages in a notebook. Like I'm gonna write for 2 pages in my notebook today, or the number of scenes, just kind of rethinking how you're setting those goals to keep making progress. Also notice that I didn't say thinking about different strategies. I said like trying and actually doing these things, because action gets you results. It's also important to ask for help when you need it. It can be really humbling to say like I'm stuck and I need people to help me, but a lot of things like you can't do alone in life. You have to get people to help you and kind of walk on that journey with you. So in fishing, it's learning from experts, it's practice, it's listening to feedback when people give you feedback, and ways to get better, and same in writing. So learning from experts. If you want to be a good writer, you have to do a lot of reading. That's super, super important. Practicing writing, even if it's just journaling or doing creative writing prompts, and listening to feedback when it's time for feedback, right? So even in my first drafts, I'm not asking for feedback. Maybe I'm brainstorming with a trusted friend who's also a writer, but I'm not saying, hey, tell me about this scene and how I can make it better, right? And there's a reason for that we'll talk about soon. And finally, just continuing to show up. In fishing, like you're not gonna catch a fish if you're not on the water. In writing, you're not gonna get your book done if you don't open your notebook or you don't open your computer. You have to show up to wherever your craft or your hobby is, right? If you're an athlete, you're not gonna get better if you're not on the court or on the track or in the field, wherever that is. If you're a musician, if you don't show up to your instrument, you're not gonna get better. You have to show up consistently. And showing up because you want to, because you enjoy it, because you want to get better, because you want to reach a goal, and you don't need to publicly announce or tell people or post on social media or make a YouTube video every time you are practicing something. It's important to keep a lot of that time between you and your craft or your hobby, between you and that. So again, we talked about Taylor Swift. I said we were coming back here, so there's a few reasons why Taylor Swift is my favorite artist. Number one, I'm gonna give you guys a quick tip too. So if you take anything from this presentation, it's how to get better seats at concerts, okay? So my senior year of high school, after my friends and I graduated, 6 of us bought tickets to see Taylor Swift at the Speak Now tour, like actual Speak Now, not Taylor's version. So we drove up to Milwaukee after graduation to go see her concert, and we got to the concert super, super early. And again, we just graduated high school, we have no money, so we had nosebleed seats at the arena. So we get to our seats, we're one of the first people in the arena. Taylor's people are walking around. So we get to our seats, Taylor's people come up to us and they're like, hey, are these your seats? And we're like, yes. And they say, well, do you want better seats? And we're like, duh, of course we do. So they're like, here's free pit passes, enjoy. So we got to see Taylor Swift in the pit at this tour for free. And that was before she was even super big and wouldn't get like, now I don't know if she'd ever do this, but she like got down from the stage and came into the pit for a couple of songs. So at one point I was like, probably as close to like Taylor Swift is free. So get to concerts early, try and get upgrades from the people working the concert. She's also an incredible writer if you really look at her lyrics, but the reason I'm bringing up Taylor Swift today is because over the weekend she won a bunch of awards at the iHeart Music Festival, and one of her acceptance speeches really talks about the importance of just spending time with what you're doing without publicly showing it off for people.
And I just want to say, like, when I was 12 years old, I had the luxury of spending thousands of hours working at my craft, practicing, making mistakes through trial and error. And that was all completely unobserved, right? So that was just me and my craft. And I'm looking out into this crowd and I'm seeing so many ambitious, cool, smart, awesome people who have dreams. And like we live in this world where there's so much immediate feedback constantly. Like you get feedback for everything you share with the world now. Like everything you post, you get feedback, whether it's good or bad or whatever. I just want to say, if I had one hope for you, I would say that I hope that you get to nurture your hobby and your passion just between you and that craft. And you give yourself time. Give yourself time to make mistakes. Give yourself time to hone your craft. I'm a firm believer that anything you feed your mind, it will internalize. Anything you feed the internet, it will attempt to kill. And I don't want that for your dreams.
Sorry about that. So just for time, just a couple things we'll go through too. So it took me 4.5 months to write the first draft of Rapid City Summer, and it took closer to 3 years to end up revising this project for a lot of different reasons. And the main part of revision was changing the ages of the characters and kind of changing their timeline and their experiences. So originally Natalie wasn't 15, she was 14. You wouldn't think that'd make a big difference, but it did. So aging up my characters required a lot of changing things about the story and ways they behaved and things they did. So that required a lot of time to change and make those adjustments. But then pitching a book, I'll have you guys participate here. How many no's did I get before I signed my publishing contract? How many rejections did I have to get until I heard that one yes to make this, story into a publishable book? Yeah, what do you think? So, more than 7. More than 7. Up here, yeah. More than 20. More than 50. Yeah. Less than 87. A little less than 70. But what's your guess? 65. 65. So yeah, so 65 no's before I finally heard. Yeah, so it was almost this many, but 65. So again, to revise and publish a book, all of the same things: perseverance, trying different strategies, asking for help, and showing up. So just quickly, ways this looked in revision. Clearly, I heard a lot of no's. No and rejection does not faze me anymore, but that took practice to get used to that. So just kind of persevering. No doesn't mean like never, it just means not now. So not giving up on that. I have a total of 5 different drafts of Rapid City Summer, and I queried lots of different people. That's just a fancy word for asking, like, hey, please publish my book. It's good, and people will love it. So I had to query and ask lots of different people for that opportunity, getting help from agents, from other people reading the book, giving me feedback, telling me ways it can get better, and then just continuing to show up. Because I believed in myself and what I could do. I believed in this dream. I believed in this story that much. And so I never gave up, even when there were days where I just wanted to set my notebooks on fire and go through my computer in the dumpster. I just kept showing up and refused to give up. Writers don't give up. People with dreams don't give up on dreams. Good things often take time to create and put into the world. So in conclusion, what I want you guys to take away from today, whether you're a writer, an athlete, a musician, a performer, whatever your thing is, please just continue to love what you do and have passion for what you do. Like you have that passion for a reason, and don't let that fire burn out. Persevere, try different strategies, ask for help, keep showing up without constantly asking for feedback or showing off publicly, and never ever give up on you or your stories. Thank you. We should have some time for some questions. So does anybody have any questions? I do not. I do not tie my own flies. I do not have the patience, or just they're so tiny. They're so tiny. I admire people who do, but that's not for me. No. Yeah, go ahead.
Are you an English teacher?
I am an English teacher. Yes. Yeah, I teach 7th grade English in Lake Zurich, but I also used to teach high school English. I used to teach freshmen and juniors. So, yeah. Yeah. The others, yeah, go ahead.
What motivated you on your journey? Like, did anybody like your family, like anybody
cliche, but like my mom was super supportive the entire time. The amount of time she would like beg to read an early version of this book, and I'm like, Mom, I'm not ready. Like, you'll get to read this book, you know, whenever. Like, I promise. But she was a big supporter. And at first, I was really afraid to like tell my friends I was writing the book to, and just like in case I failed, or none of my other like close friends write, but they were ended up being super supportive. So just kind of getting the support from friends and things like that. But it was just something I always wanted to do as a kid, so I think just that internal drive too. Yeah. Up there. Say it one more time.
What are your top 3 music artists?
Top 3 music artists. Okay, so besides Taylor Swift, I really like Mumford & Sons. I really like the new Mumford album. And I don't know if anyone in here has heard of Steven Wilson Jr., but that's another artist I really enjoy. He's kind of up and coming, so highly recommend checking him out too. So I'd say my current top 3. Yeah. Anyone else? Yeah. Yeah.
Like, how do you balance like creating books and influencing them?
I'm tired all the time. I will say that. it's a very difficult balance. I think honestly, it's sometimes just like chucking my phone across the room and like eliminating as many distractions as possible. But the other thing, and this just works too, I think in sports or if you're an athlete, and that's a lot of my background too, is setting really small goals. Like instead of just saying like I'm gonna go write like an entire book and hopefully be done in a couple of months. It's I'm gonna sit down after work and I'm gonna write for like 10 minutes, and sometimes I just start that small. And it's like those mind tricks you have to play, even with like if you're gonna go for a run and you don't want to. You're like, I'm gonna run for 5 minutes, and usually after 5 minutes you're like good to keep going. So it's like starting with small goals, and usually you'll want to continue once you get started. So that's the best trick I have for balance. But it is, I'll tell you, it is not easy. It is definitely not easy. Yeah.
Why did you have to change the age of your characters?
So why did I have to change the age of my characters? Okay, so I originally wanted to write a story with 14-year-olds because you don't see a lot of books like 8th graders, freshmen, kids who are 14. Honestly, it's a weird like marketing and publishing thing. They're too old for middle grade, but they're too young for young adult. But no one really knows where to put that age on a bookshelf. And I kind of wanted to be like, hey, I'm going to write this book and figure it out. But even that was really difficult. So to stay as close to that as possible, I went up to young adult and made them 15. So it's kind of like a younger young adult story.